I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to pass around the sign-in sheet. Attached to the sign-in sheet is a posting that I wanted to hand out in hard copy. It's posted on the website, but what it is just a reminder of the homework assignment, and much appreciated those who sent it in. Thank you very much. But just a reminder of the 3 questions that we're looking at and the source of those. So if you'd each take one of those as it goes around, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. You have your new addition to your binder, or maybe binders by now, with the usual components to it. I'd like to, if I could, draw your attention for a moment to the committee schedule and meeting dates. As this more and more moves toward a conclusion, and your processing and your ideas that follow this long series of presentations, we will have a discussion next week. Tonight we have economic development communication in the manager's office. That won't take the full time. So, but we don't have enough data input from your homework to make a discussion out of that this evening. But next week on March 10th, Parks and Rec. And then we really move into potential cost savings. It should also say revenue generation and other items, because I will have all that information back to you before then. All the information you send, we'll put it together in one single document, get it back to you, and then we'll have it so we can post it around the room so that next week you can have a substantial amount of time to begin to discuss that in smaller groups and begin to move toward the finish line. The next week, you're off, the 17th. Then next week is the ballpark and municipal court. Again, we moved the engineering down to March 31st so that we didn't take up too much time on March 24th, giving you, again, the bulk of the evening to work and discuss the items of interest from the input you provide. And then finally, engineering, and then we have 2 meetings after that to finalize a report in a way that works for you and is useful to the council. So with that minor change, that's the schedule going out. And again, it turns over to you. Yes.
Have the meeting near the ballpark, at the ballpark in the afternoon.
About 1 o'clock out. Yeah. Sorry with me.
Should be able to use the city's suite.
Now, a suggestion to you, because I got a note that it was very difficult when you watched this on the internet, very difficult to hear several of the voices. So I think that's going to be mostly a matter of getting that mic closer to yourself. So if you'd be kind enough to do that, that would help with those people who want to watch it. Are you okay with this adjustment to the schedule? Is that okay? It's a minor adjustment. It gives you more time to do the things that you want to do. Anything from the previous... I'm sorry. It's about the 3rd, 4th one in, I think, with the single sheet. Anything from last meeting that is left undone? We posted a number of items today, answers to questions. There's 7 or 8 of them, I think, that were posted today. But anything from last session that you want to touch base on?
I looked about 3 o'clock and I just can't hear.
I think if we'd use put that a little closer to yourself.
I'm sorry. I looked on the website for the posting of questions and answers at about 3 o'clock and I didn't see them, so it must have been later this afternoon.
It may have been. It may have been. And you have them all, yes, they're all in the packet also, the ones that were posted. And that's our routine. You always get what we posted in your packets also. So we have, yes. Yes, sir.
If they weren't answered yet, are they going to be coming? Yes. Okay.
Anything else? So we need to look at the minutes and get approval of the minutes, if we could get a motion to approve those. They're very brief and summary.
Motion approved. This is Mike Kiak, motion to approve.
Do we have them? I'm sorry, I saw the officer, the fireman get up and go quickly. I didn't hear if there was a...
Mike Kiak, motion to approve.
Thank you.
Evelyn Nelson, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. So our first presentation tonight is a discussion of economic development. I was kind of looking forward to this, as I'm sure you are, because this is... oh, excuse me, I apologize. Sorry, John, I jumped right over you there. Then economic development.
Hey, Dick.
Yes, sir.
Just really quick before we get started with the presentation, I kind of wanted, I don't know if this is the time to maybe throw something out to the committee. I was thinking when everybody's talking about throwing out brainstorming ideas on what to do with the, ideas on savings and stuff like that, I'm actually kind of sitting back and curious on some of the things that are actually being worked on right now, what the city is thinking about doing, so we can kind of see what road they're going down, compare some of our ideas that we have. So, I mean, I don't know if anybody else, I'm not trying to add more presentations, but it wouldn't be an operating presentation. It'd just be, okay, this is what we would be doing right now, or these are ideas we'd be playing with, and then at least we can see those and kind of compare and contrast some stuff that we have.
Can John possibly comment on that as a part of tonight's presentation?
We can take a look at that, but one thing I hesitate to share with the committee what we're doing in advance of the city council. And so I'll have to take a look at what we're working on and what we may be able to share with you or not. So.
I'm just overall thinking from a time standpoint, I mean, you guys deal with it on a day-to-day basis, and here we are, we're playing with two things. We're trying to learn all this stuff, and at the same time trying to make decisions that we obviously want to make sure it's impactful in the right ways. And so that's the reason why I bring it up, and so that's why I posed.
And I appreciate that observation and that problem, because I have to submit a balanced budget to the city council, and I'm going to do that no matter what. And so it is unfair to you in a way, because you don't get to see, well, what are we thinking? And so let me take a look at that and see what we may and may not be able to give to you. Evelyn?
John, I appreciate so much the work that has been given to us by city staff, and I've looked at a lot of the information that has come to us early on. And one of the things I noted was a report from Matrix Consulting. That report was done in 2006, 07. And I know the whole purpose of that was a management assessment, as well as effectiveness of services. Phase 1 of that consulting agreement pointed out strengths, weaknesses in every single department of the city. And it strikes me that we're looking at the same kind of information. And so what would be helpful in my mind is having information that would show how much of the matrix recommendations have been implemented, how many are left to be implemented, and if your budget for 9-10 has incorporated any of the recommendations from matrix. If so, where are we in that process?
I can tell you, Evelyn, that and we'd be happy to share those reports with you. We report to the City Council quarterly on the progress on the matrix. We just about 2 quarters ago switched to sending out the entire report, this is done, to saying here's the highlights of what hasn't been done. But we'd be happy to get those reports to you, because I forget, Brian, is it 280?
241 recommendations.
241 recommendations, and we have implemented 80-some%?
Either completed or in progress.
80-some%. And there's a certain percentage that we can't implement because of budget. As, for example, the 3rd deputy city manager, that isn't going to happen for some time. And there's issues like that we can't implement because of budget. But everything else, we just had a meeting this morning with APS, for example, about one of the recommendations in Matrix is that we acquire the streetlight system. And we've been meeting with APS discussing this for 2 years now. And so we finally got to top management today and reached agreement on how it's going to move forward. But we'll be happy to share that with you.
I appreciate that because I know that they would have identified any inefficiencies, which is kind of what we look at a little bit here, as well as many other things. And if we can save ourselves some of that labor by having you give us what has already been, you know, scheduled out and how much of it is accomplished, that might help us in some of our decision making as well.
Thank you. We'll be happy to share that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
John, may I note that on the disc that you were given originally, it has the whole matrix report on there with the staff response, but it doesn't have that update.
And I have read that, and that's why I'm asking the question tonight. I'm hoping that perhaps, since it's 3 years hence,
Absolutely.
I'm hoping that perhaps there's an update.
There is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. There it is. Tonight we're going to, well, this gives you a little of my background again. I've worked in city management for 40 years now. I've been city manager of Fort Collins, Colorado for 9 years, Vancouver, Washington for 5 years, Lake Forest, Illinois for 12 years, Robbinsdale, Minnesota for 2.5 years, and county administrator in Jefferson County, Washington, immediately before coming here for 3.5 years. Master's degree in public administration, Bachelor of Arts in political science from PLU, yay PLU, in Tacoma, Washington, and the certificate in public administration and urban affairs at Oregon State University. The agenda tonight is we're going to provide an overview. We're going to talk about what we do, that we as the city manager's office, what is the city manager's office, and a summary of reductions and efficiencies that have been implemented citywide for your benefit. Here is the city manager's mission statement, and I won't review that. I'll just note that quite simply, the city manager's office is responsible for the day-to-day administration of the city. And that can conjure up in your own mind what that involves, and I'll try to get to a little of that today. And if you have any questions, be happy to answer that. The city manager's authority comes from the Charter, Article 3, Section 3, and I would encourage you to read that. This is an organizational chart of the city manager's office. As you can see, there's an economic development director and a city clerk on the left-hand side. They are direct reports to me. And then you have deputy city manager and interim deputy city manager and the executive assistants under them, and I'll talk in greater detail in the next slide about what their responsibilities include. And then the assistant city manager, which is Mario, has under him the assistant to the mayor, assistant to the council, the community advocate, and the staff assistant. And then the executive assistant supervisor, which is Denise, is my right hand. She has under her 2 executive assistants. And then intergovernmental programs manager, Romina, is our crackerjack of a lobbyist. She spends right now most of her time over in downtown Phoenix. But she does that, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then intergov and grants administration. We have 2 frozen positions in our office. One we eliminated is the strategic planning coordinator. That was eliminated about 1.5 years ago. And then the frozen position is the deputy city manager, and we have not, we've replaced that with an interim deputy city manager, which is Mark Gaylord, who is our longtime fire chief, and then we backfilled his position with Paul Louisi, who you've heard from, and he's the interim fire chief. A couple of changes to note there is that previous budgets have included communications as a function of the city manager's office. That's no longer the case because that has been merged into, as you'll hear in a moment from Paula, into the economic development arena. And another change is that the community advocate position has been absorbed by my office, and that's because we eliminated the Community Services Department, and the Community Services Director was one of the eliminations of the staff that we did. And then we absorbed the activities of the Community Services Department in other agencies, such as the City Manager's Office and the Police Department primarily. The Police Department got the neighborhood services portion of that, the code enforcement portion of that, and anyway, so they were absorbed into the Police Department. This shows in a little more detail what the deputy city managers are responsible for. So you have Brian Dahlke, deputy city manager, on the left-hand side of the chart, and under him is finance, human resources, information and technology, and parks and recreation. And then on the right-hand side you have the interim deputy city manager, and under him you have fire, police, community development, public works, and engineering. They are responsible for managing those departments, and so those departments report directly to them. Then you'll see in the middle the city clerk and the economic development, and under the economic development you'll see the communications office, and then the assistant to the city manager and the mayor and council support, and the intergovernmental program, and there you have intergovernmental and grants. So what services and programs directly are we responsible for? We carry out major policy initiatives, and in this particular area you'll get things like the ballpark. That has been a tremendous accomplishment and a tremendous time-consuming effort on the part of the city manager's office. And Brian Dahlke has been spearheading that and has done a fantastic job on that. Economic development, we have just announced recently that SunTech is coming to the city, and that was a very major accomplishment of our economic development department. And we have had other major accomplishments also with Amazon.com coming, and then they've expanded already. So they're up, I think, at about 800,000 square feet right now. And Macy's Distribution Center are at about 500,000 square feet. And the CTCA is an achievement of our economic development efforts. Those are some of the major accomplishments that we've had in those arenas recently. And we're working on very aggressively with 4 different companies, and that's about all we can say about them, but Paula, again, will talk about that. Transportation we've paid special attention to, for example, the I-10 project. The mayor and the council made that an extremely high priority, and we got that moved up from 2011. It wasn't supposed to even start until next year. To 2007 is when they started, and now we're done with the major expansion through Goodyear, and now they're doing the outside lanes. And public safety, we constantly are making efforts there in the fire and police arena. And in quality of life, we did a citizen survey recently, you heard last week, and over 58%, which actually surprised me. I was pleasantly surprised that it was that high because of all the budget reductions that we've been imposing. But citizens are still basically satisfied with the services that the city offers and the job that we're doing with the budget. We oversee municipal operations in accordance with the charter and the city council policy. We have 13 departments and 511 employees at this moment. We prepare and implement a budget. It's a $375 million budget, which we've been reviewing with you. $74.8 million of that is in capital improvements, and $50.3 million is the general fund operating budget. Under the intergovernmental programs, the primary interests there are protecting our local interests, which I've been amazed since I've been in Arizona. That's a major job. Because we have to spend a lot of time, and fortunately we have someone like Romina who spends the time there with the legislature in watching all the bills that come up and all the bills that go through. And Romina is a very well thought of intergov person within the Phoenix, within the state, and so many of the intergovs in the other communities look to her also for her leadership. She coordinates efforts with regional and national interests For example, she and the mayor will be headed back to Washington, D.C., I think in a week or so, because they will be lobbying in Washington for several things. One is the preservation of Luke Air Force Base, and the other is for some grants that we're seeking. Serves as the liaison to Luke Air Force Base, which is a major time commitment, and the Saving Luke efforts that are going on, the League of Cities and Towns, and the Maricopa Association of Governments. MAG is a COG, a Council of Governments, and it's a very strong, successful Council of Governments in the state of Arizona. And the state has a tremendous reputation and history with COG, and it's represented, and they are responsible for many transportation issues. Transportation funding all flows through them. So we work very diligently with COG and Arizona Department of Transportation. She also tracks laws that are being passed by the state and the federal legislators to ensure that they are beneficial to the city, to us. We have a Washington, D.C. lobbyist under contract, and then we also had a local lobbyist, and that was very instrumental and key to getting the solar bill passed, 1403. And that was the new bill that allowed Suntech to say yes, they would come here. And that was a major effort on the part of GPEC, Governor Brewer, our staff, everybody was involved in that. And so that was a major accomplishment. Under grants administration, we research and identify grant opportunities for departments citywide. We coordinate with departments and provide technical assistance and also write grants that will benefit the city. We oversee the matching funds needed for grants and ensure compliance with all the provisions of grant funding. Matt Hansen was our grants administrator. He got stolen away by the governor's office, so we had a very good, strong grants program under him. He had been with us for a couple years, and now we have Christine McMurdy in that position under Romina, and obviously grants have become very important again because of the federal government. Here's a pie chart of the 2009 grants administration, and the different grants are identified by ARA grants, which is the stimulus package from the federal government, grants in the city manager's office, fire department, parks and recreation, and police department. It totals about $6-7 million just this past year alone. And we have some other major accomplishments in getting a water and sewer loan from the State Department, the State Department of Environmental Resources, and that is for like $6 or $8 million.
John?
Yes. Bill?
This is Bill Stipp. Many of the departments we've heard from already mention that they work at administering grants. Harvey mentioned last week community development, community block grant, et cetera. How much of, I don't want to say duplication as they're going on, but if the individual departments are managing the grants, et cetera, what is the grants coordinator? How do those two connect to one another?
There is no duplication because we've gotten that all streamlined now. Community development, for example, administers the actual grant. We, at the manager's office, have to do all the reports to the federal government, and the federal reports are time-consuming and difficult. But she does the reporting and acts as a professional assistant or a liaison to the departments. So if they have questions or that developed over the period of time, they ask her for the advice. So she is the one that's actually, our grants program is the one that actually is responsible for those grants. She's the one that will go to prison if they goof up. But the departments that are directly affected with it are the ones that manage it.
Okay, thank you.
John, question. Gary Gelser. On all of these grants, there are some type of city matching funds that either are in cash or kind. Could you elaborate on, the how much the city, out of the city's operating budget, we've had to
I'd be happy to,
utilize?
Gary. We're trying to think of what questions you may ask, so this one was right on. We matched last year $835,962 in cash matches. We had in-kind matches of $76,839, and that was against grant totals of $11.816 million. So it's roughly $10 for every dollar that we invest, we get back from the grant itself.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Community support is the community, constituent support is the community advocate that works in our office. She handles the web-based citizen communication system. GovQA system helps manage the citizen requests for service and provides better tracking. Also administers the community funding program. This program, we just met yesterday with the subcommittee of the council. This program is one where the council distributes money. People apply for money, organizations, 501c3s, apply for money. The council members consider the application and then divide up this very small pie in comparison to what the requests are. This, in fiscal year 9-10, the budget was $181,000. They awarded $178,300. Yesterday, they reviewed applications. I think it was for $225,000, and they were able to recommend to the council awards that will total, I think it was $114,000 in that neighborhood. This year, there's 23 nonprofit organizations that are benefiting from these grants, and then they're also responsible for the Citizen Academy, which is a 10-week program, and 18 residents went through it this year. The constituent support outputs, they handled 1,600 emails in 2009, 1,427 in 2008, 1,263 in 2007, handle an average of about 500 phone calls per year, and they have walk-in customers of about 25. The goal that we have set for them is to respond to all citizen inquiries within 48 hours. Obviously, the response might be that we're working on it or something, but there is always a response within 48 hours. Mayor and council support is under the city manager's office also. They are responsible for researching and following up on constituent inquiries, providing support for special projects, and providing support for committees that the mayor and council serve on. Mayor and council serve on an awful lot of committees. They include the Maricopa Association of Governments, MAG, the Executive Council of MAG, the Regional Council of MAG, Transportation Policy Committee of MAG, Human Resources Committee of MAG, and the Continuum of Care and Homelessness Committee of MAG. Other organizations that they serve on include Arizona League of Cities, the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, Luke West Valley Partners, National League of Cities, City Neighborhood Liaisons, Maricopa County Development Advisory Committee, and others like that, Valley Metro, and agencies such as that. So the council support works with the mayor and council on those different committees, arranges meetings, makes sure that they keep track of what meeting they're supposed to be at so they're there, and follow up with what comes out of those meetings. Also, a big responsibility for the mayor and council staff is the special projects. And a few are listed here that they're involved in: education partnership, small business workshops, faith community roundtable, children with disabilities, Goodyear in Action Day, GPEC, the Greater Phoenix Economic Development Council, and so forth. The fiscal impact in the city manager's office, we have made reductions in fiscal year 9 of $160,000. That was basically in travel and training, grant matching funds, overtime, and commodities. We cut an additional $290,000 in the current fiscal year 10, and that strategic planning coordinator position was frozen. Travel and training again, consultant fees, cell phones, and employee recognition. In addition, This does not include the PIO information because that's now part of Paula's department, and it does not include $93,307 in savings that we've experienced with the interim deputy city manager. Those savings are in other departments, such as the fire department, where we appointed Paul Louisi as the interim fire chief and things like that. But that's another $93,000 that we are responsible for. The fiscal impact citywide over the last 3 years, fiscal year 7 and 8, we cut the budget by $3.6 million. Fiscal year 8 and 9, $3 million. Fiscal year 9 and 10, we cut it by $6.8 million additional dollars. And then fiscal year 9-10 mid-year, we have also come up with $800,000 in commodities and contractual services and additional salary savings of $1.2 million. So we have aggressively pursued balancing this budget, and over the last 3 years we have cut $15.4 million from the city's budget. Key internal cutbacks since fiscal year 7 and 8 budget, we've frozen or laid off positions citywide. We are at 83 positions now that we have eliminated. And that's about equivalent to $4.1 million in savings from the salary cuts. We've eliminated 2 directors from the city's payroll. One was water resources. We combined the departments in the public works and water resources, and then we did not fill the water resources position. Charles is now the director of, as I mentioned at the last couple meetings ago, Charles is now the director of Public Works. And then also, as I mentioned, the Community Services Department, we disbanded that and absorbed that in the other agencies around the city. We combined the Water and Public Works departments for efficiencies. We eliminated the Community Services Department. We redeployed the functions. As I mentioned, code enforcement is to the police, neighborhood services is in the police, citizens advocate is to the city manager. Combined economic development and communications, that enabled us to eliminate 2 positions from those areas. Redeployment of fire staff from the Sonoran Valley. We talked a little bit about the Sonoran Valley and the fact that Montage went bankrupt. We, at the time that the city had accomplished that annexation and had approved the Montage development plan, one of the first requirements was that the city had to hire an additional fire station. And so that was 14 additional firefighters that were hired and brought into the city. And so we ended up, okay, here's a development down there. 88 people live in single-family trailers down there, and that's no development's going to happen. So what do we do? And so the fire department is spending their shifts down there and answering maybe 1 call a day. And so we brought them back up here. We negotiated with Maricopa, with the city of Maricopa, and the city of Maricopa now provides fire protection to that area. And they did it by moving a station over closer to us, and we negotiated that we would pay them, I think it's roughly $75,000 versus the 14 men and women that we had to pay. And that will provide the fire protection, plus $50,000 to help move the station, which isn't quite done yet, but that is something that we will still owe them. And that has worked out extremely well. What we did then was bring those 14 personnel back up here, and we have since injected them into the fire system up here in Goodyear and allowed overtime savings of $369,795, and constant staffing, which the fire chief reviewed with you, has resulted in $233,558 in savings. So we have accomplished $603,353 in savings from that. We stopped merit increases in fiscal year 8 and 9. We continued that in 9 and 10, and 10 and 11. And no market adjustments in fiscal year 9 and 10, and 10 and 11. The stopped merit increases saved the city about $1.2 million per year based on the average payroll costs that we have. And the no market adjustments was January of 2009. We were supposed to receive an additional, the employees were supposed to receive an additional 1%, and that was not granted to them. And fiscal year 9 and 10, we needed an additional 3.6% to be at the council set policy of 101%, and that was not given to them. And then fiscal year 10 and 11, we needed 0.3% to be at the 101%, and that was not given. So we have very aggressively managed through that, and the employees have been very supportive of those efforts. Continuation of key internal cutbacks. We have a hiring freeze that's been instituted since I've been here, and what that means is every time a position opens up, the deputy city managers and I review in detail with the department director the needs of that employee, and we determine whether or not that employee will be granted and we will recruit them, or whether that position will be frozen. And you've seen the results of the frozen positions that we've implemented, of 83 as of now. We look at alternative delivery systems, such as the Sonoran Valley, the fire delivery, and another example is the Sonoran Valley is the police protection. We negotiated with the sheriff's office protection that has guarantees there in effect that there will be one sheriff deputy in that area 24/7. So, and that costs us, I forget the amount, but that is an alternative way to deliver the service. And one that we're working on right now, Mark and I had lunch with the city manager of Litchfield Park today, and we're trying to negotiate a contract with them so that if they pass their property tax, we will furnish them fire protection out of our Station 183 with no increased costs to the city of Goodyear, and so that will be an additional income stream to the city. Right now they have rural metro where the people can voluntarily sign up for protection, and if they have about 55% of the residents right now sign up for that. If they get a fire and they are not signed up, they will get a bill, and Darryl was telling us today that somebody recently got a bill for $37,000 because of fire. They finally negotiated down, but it was $24,000 was what they got billed. So there are some advantages and incentives for the people to get city protection, and that's what Litchfield Park city manager is interested in, and that's what we're working at. Right-sizing departments, we're doing that constantly, and we've tried to give you some examples of that over the past month and a half. Reducing service levels that least affect the public, probably the best example I can think of there, because most of what we are doing does not affect the public. But the best example there is probably the infamous two-day, twice per month bulk trash pickup. You know, we made those changes. We laid off 2 people because of those changes, so we could do it with 2 less people. And some of you know the problems that we had implementing that. Right now, it's working extremely well with 2 less people that we've been able to implement. Deferring capital improvement projects, we have deferred so far art in public places about $250,000. EMR, the Estrella Mountain Park, $1.8 million up there. Signals, $300,000. So we're constantly looking at what capital projects can be delayed. Delaying preventative maintenance and extending cycles or eliminating replacement programs is something that we constantly are striving to keep a balance of, because, as you all know, it can become very expensive when you start deferring maintenance on vehicles and deferring replacement of vehicles. We have not gotten a new police car in 2 years, and so they're very high mileage, and that our costs of maintaining the vehicles is going up exponentially, so we're trying to find a balance there. We just authorized buying 1 new car this last week, And so, but we're trying to do that, and so we are deferring as much maintenance and as much replacement vehicles as possible. We have, for the past year and a half, gone through our entire fleet, and we have gotten rid of 41 different vehicles that the city has. That then resulted in, okay, we laid off one mechanic in our fleet services. So it has impacts like that down the line. That's my presentation for this evening, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them or get you the information. Thank you.
John, I have a question. Have you looked into leasing the vehicles as opposed to purchasing them? The difference?
Yes, we have. And we're constantly looking at that. Some of our vehicles are leased, aren't they, Larry?
Vehicles are-
Oh, no. But yes, we are constantly looking at that.
I have a question, Joan Shield. If I'm understanding what you're saying this evening, under administration, you have 13 departments, separate departments that are under your management.
Yes.
Can you tell me, do those 13 departments have the same management style for each department?
Generally speaking, I'd say yes. And by that, if you're talking about, okay, a director, a deputy directors, if it's a big enough department, same hierarchical, I'd say yes to that question.
Well, the reason I'm asking is when the fire department gave their presentation, they said that they functioned under the balanced scorecard management style, and I asked you at that time if you implemented that, and you said no. And I asked if you understood that, and you said no. So
I don't believe I said no. I understand the balanced scorecard. I explained to you the balanced scorecard that we use, and it's not the balanced scorecard that you're talking about, but it's a different method of management that we use.
well, I was thinking that if you had 13 departments that you manage and each one had a different management style, oh my God, what a difficult job.
No, they all have generally the same management style. Each of the deputies is responsible for those departments that are under them, and they meet with them once a week. And they, well, Brian today was just doing one of the reviews of one of the department directors. We do reviews every 6 months, and so that's the point when we establish goals and objectives that they need to meet during the next 6 months. And so that's how we manage the departments. Thank you. Bill?
Scott Mikes. Actually, I had a question. You said the infamous bulk trash. Is there? I'm sure you guys have played around with numbers fairly often by switching it back and forth. But what is the? I mean, we do it twice a month. What have you guys looked at backing that off a little bit, and if there is any cost benefit to that, or there would have to be, I guess, if you didn't.
I'll tell you, this whole thing started because of our citizen survey. We did a citizen survey a year ago, or 2 years ago, actually, and it said that, I forget the numbers, Paula remembers them clearly, but something like 75% of the people use it once a month or less, and a higher percentage even use it never. And so we said, okay, so we're going to this great expense for 25% of the people, so let's go to, and it's also the most popular service that the city offers. I mean, so we're weighing these things, and we said, okay, let's cut it to twice a month, so it's a partial cutting, and we'll be able to eliminate 2 people and go forward with that, and that's what we did. We could have gone to once a month or once every quarter, which a lot of cities in this area do, and that would save additional monies, yes, and so that is something that we're constantly looking at.
That's directly I mean, you know, the last survey, obviously, it's the numbers are still the same, and so I mean, when you said you've already looked at the cost, what type of numbers have you seen to changing to once every 3 months?
I don't remember those numbers right off the top of my head, but we'll be happy to get those for you because we looked at every option when we did implement this. I think it was an additional 2 people could go somewhere, but we'll get that for you.
Thank you.
Bill, did you have something? Oh, okay. Yes, Howard.
Howard Broadbeck. We appreciate, especially these last few slides, I appreciate the last few slides you put in there. It's similar to what we've seen from other departments that have made presentations about what all the city departments have gone through as far as reducing their expenses and cutting costs and all that kind of thing. What's been a little bit absent from any of the presentations has been suggested new ideas. We haven't had anybody actually come here and say, I joked about it at one point, but I've got several ideas for how we could cut costs. And all these departments report into you. So are what you're really saying is that, from 150,000 feet, the city really has done everything that it can do to get expenses down, and that there's really not a lot of other things you could do without affecting services dramatically, and you don't have any really good ideas to go for from there?
That's exactly what we have said going into this presentation. I think that there are several areas where we may be able to make some savings. One of them, Scott just asked about, trash bulk pickup. Pick it up once a quarter, implement that. The basic bottom line is that, and I was going over this with our finance department yesterday, the basic bottom line is that if we didn't have a new ballpark that we were paying for out of the general fund, and we didn't have HERF, which is the Highway User Fund, so that's $1.5 million subsidy from the general fund. If we didn't have those two, there's no problem. The city of Goodyear is in pretty good shape. We have aggressively pursued these savings from the start, and we are at the point now, and that's why we asked you, this committee, to look at services and prioritize those services, because we are at the point where additional cuts will affect services.
I guess for me, just from some of the things that have come up as questions as the departments made presentations, for example, the traffic light slide that the public works guy had, that when you did the math, it said we've got a half a man year being spent in maintenance for every traffic light in the city. When you see something like that, I guess I question, how can you feel that there aren't other cost reductions that can be made?
And I don't think that, I think that the number actually was 750 hours, and that I did check on that today, and that was per traffic light, but that's per traffic light that they get called on. We get calls every week. Somebody, won't mention names, but some citizen calls us every week and says, well, I sat too long at this traffic light. So our guys go out and try to tinker with it, and it's not just maintenance. It's each traffic signal has a big box at the corner. It's programming the computer to do it all. And so that's what they basically are doing. But it isn't, and I am getting that information for you, so I'll get it back to you, Howard. We have probably in the 80s for traffic signals. We have, I know Joan asked about traffic lights, and so we were thinking, well, maybe that's referring to this, street lights. But it isn't, because there's 8,500 street lights that we have in town. But we don't have 80 divided by 2, 40 people in that department. So we will have to get additional information for you there. But
see, to me, that's similar to last week, where the guy from the community development, and he was very proud of the fact that he had 100% customer satisfaction. If it's the same citizen calling up about the same traffic light every week, at what point do they say, we've looked at that traffic light, thanks for your input, but we're just not going out this week? And when you look at 100% customer satisfaction in any department, it would seem like it would set off alarm bells to say, we might be spending way too much money to keep these customers satisfied in that particular department. So I guess I wouldn't call it frustration. For me, it's more disappointment that in 7 weeks of presentations, there have been a number of items like that have come up. But I get the sense, and I think it's probably from the top down, that people in the city, and again, I do appreciate, you're your numbers speak for yourself. You've taken this many millions of dollars and that many millions of dollars out of the budget. I don't know what exactly has come out of the actuals, but at the same time, we still have a problem. And I think that at some point people to throw up their hands and say, well, there's just nothing else we can do. That's probably been my biggest disappointment in listening to these presentations over 7 weeks.
I would just remind you one thing that I started with in answering your questions. Look at the ballpark's coming up in 2 weeks. $8.8 million, I believe, is our subsidy to that ballpark out of our general fund.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir here. I mean, there's no doubt that that's an issue. The other thing that you have as a big issue, which you don't have a lot of control over, was what your finance director said was the Lehman Brothers losses, and also your interest losses on your on the funds that you had invested. The city was making $4 or $5 million a year a couple years ago, and now it's almost zero. Those are all. There's no doubt that those are valid points, but it is what it is. That's the reality, and so the next question is, well, what do you do? What do you do about the reality? And are there other things that can be done?
What we're doing about the reality, we're telling you tonight. I mean, amongst the other meetings too.
Yeah,
Gary.
I agree with Howard's frustration because I've sat through all 7 of these meetings and I've been through many budget hearings. I think what the committee needs to do is, and I don't mean to be snide about this, but if the committee feels that the public safety and the Part 1 crime rate has been driven too low, then one of the questions is, do we cut some portion of public safety so that the crime rate goes up and we save $1 million by reducing, one squad of police officers? Another option that this committee can make is, if you think that the emergency fire response or the emergency medical response is too good and we're meeting the 4-minute standard and we can slip back to 5 minutes or 6 minutes, then the question is, do we consolidate one station or put one station in mothballs or some of that thing? What I have heard at all of these presentations is that the easy stuff has been cut. The more difficult stuff has been trimmed, and now we're getting down to the hard choices. And that's up to this committee to make a recommendation, and that's up to council to say, this is our policy, this is what we're going to do. Because you can eliminate one, you can say, okay, this department has too many managers, and we'll wipe out we'll wipe out a manager or freeze that when it goes away, and that's $140,000 we save because that job isn't being filled. However, other people are going to do the same amount of work. And the work level is starting, because the economy is starting to turn around, the work level is starting to go up, and you're seeing that in some of the numbers that have been placed here. So I see the same frustration that Howard has, and quite honestly, the city council is not going to close the ballpark. And we're still going to pay $8.1 million because 3 or 4 years ago they thought it was a great idea, and it is a great idea. We're just going to have to bite the bullet for a while and see how we can live with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as one of the difficult balancing acts that we always go through, let's talk employee salaries, for example. We constantly keep track of everything that's happening around us and in the Arizona market. And Buckeye has just lost their police chief, and he cited as one of the reasons the 15% cut to his pay that he received when he got here 8 months ago, I think, from Florida. And he said, it's not worth it. I've heard that there are other circumstances, but when they cut the salaries 15, 10, and 5%, that significantly hurts people in paying bills, meeting their expenses, and their Arizona retirement system. It is something that I think Buckeye will regret. And I think that they may have had to do it, but rather than get some of the tough choices and go into services, they chose the 15, 10, and 5%. Tempe has lost a lot of department heads, and it's because of salaries. They're cutting them. Most cities, we've done surveys now of all the cities, and what have they done with salary cuts? What are they doing with furlough days? And it's something that we don't want to go to, if at all possible. We'd rather right-size the organization, quite frankly, than hit the salaries of employees. And that's one of the reasons why, as Gary said, as things start coming up, everybody's going to be grabbing for the employees at the same time. And we're all going to suffer from that if just trying to catch up right now with the roughly 10% that we've cut already is going to be hard enough for the city. And the other cities, whether they can do it as fast as we can or not, it's going to be all the employers are going to be trying to catch up at the same time. And that's going to be a tough. Buckeye, as this recovery occurs, they're going to lose all of their employees. We have been the employer of choice for many years for the Sheriff's Office, for Phoenix Police, and for Glendale. Well, we aren't anymore, but we've kind of lost that position. But it's something that we always have to keep measuring, and it is part art and part science, but it is something that we have to be cognizant of. Yes, Evelyn?
John, I compliment you for wanting to treat people appropriately, and at the same time, I'd like to kind of understand a little bit about some of the intricacies of your personnel payroll. For instance, I know when you say you stopped merit pay in 8-9, that saved you $1.2 million, and then you've continued it in 9-10 and 10-11. What I didn't see addressed here is anything about the longevity pay. Is that separate from your merit pay?
Yes, it's separate from the merit pay. It cost us about $104,000 last year, and I told the employees at the time that we issued those checks, it was around Christmas, that, okay, we're keeping this program in place because it's been budgeted, you've been expecting it, and so we're going to honor our commitment to it, but don't count on it next year, so for this coming year.
It strikes me that merit pay is to reward exemplary service. Longevity does not reward anything other than holding a seat over time. So if you were to have cut one of them, I can understand merit pay was a lot larger number, but it would make sense to me to cut longevity pay where it is not based on employee performance.
I appreciate that, and that's probably what we're doing this year. Yes, Bill?
This is Bill Stipp. Evelyn, just from a former employee perspective, just so everyone's clear, the merit part of the city's pay structure, unless it's changed in the last 6 months, also includes the
step
increases, not necessarily just good
Right.
performance. So
Right.
that there's not a hey, you're a great guy, so here's an extra 5%, and by the way, thanks for being here so long, just so that there's no misunderstanding.
And that's probably a predetermined salary schedule with steps.
Yes. Howard?
Howard Broadbeck, one specific question. In the fiscal year 2010 budget, there's an item in your budget that's called contractual services. It's not in any of the previous actuals or the 09 estimate. $3.39 million. What is that?
Mario?
It's under non-departmental, and it's called contractual services on page 226 of the budget book.
Is that thick?
And can I just say one other thing? I don't mean to be critical, okay? But you're talking about a budget or a spend in 09 that was $66 million, something like that, right? Well, that's my best guess. There's lots of different numbers, but that looks to me to be about what Goodyear spent in 09. Yeah, I'm retired from a large corporation. It was a $9 billion corporation. If I ever came to a financial presentation of any type and someone asked me about what is $3.4 million in $66 million, and I didn't know off the top of my head, I would be fired. And that, to me, is indicative of issues I think we must still have in the city of Goodyear. Given all the good stuff that you talk about that has been done, when you got a line item of $3.4 million in a $66 million budget, and there's 3 or 4 people in the room who should be able to answer that question, and it's not on the tip of somebody's tongue, you know, that speaks volumes to me as a former business unit manager.
Well,
So-
I really appreciate that, Howard, and enough said.
Okay.
Yes, Al.
Can we get back, Al Osorio, can we get back to the salaries, municipal, our staff and so on? They have steps, pretty much, depending on each year, they get a raise, correct?
Yes.
Maybe 8 steps. What are they on the, you don't know?
I'd have to have Kay come up and answer that.
They would differ, though, within department?
No.
They would be pretty much the same?
Our pay plan is basically the same throughout the city.
Have they been frozen, or
Yes.
that's been frozen?
Yes.
Do you know offhand whether they're at the peak? Could be at the peak.
Kay, do you know what percent is at the top? It's not.
There's 3 different programs, actually, one for police, one for fire, and one for all the other employees. So what you're referring to, just all the other employees have the same steps and ranges. There's 2.5% difference in steps. And I'm sorry, I don't know if I got that all. Did that answer your question?
Are they at their maximum?
There are a few employees at the maximum. We track that annually. That, of course,
Any idea what percentage might be?
boy, I would be guessing, and I wouldn't say it would be 10%, but we can get back with you with the exact figures.
We'll let you know, Al, because we get those reports every year, but we'll take a look at that. Mario, do you have an answer to that? Okay, well, Larry? Okay, but this is, you know, I really need to take issue with Howard. I have been at this business for 40 years, and to say what you just said, I think demonstrates. Larry, why don't you answer the question? It is unfair to expect me to know everything that's in that budget, because our budget is $375 million, not 66. Our general fund is 66, and I really resent your comments, Larry.
Well, if I can just respond, this is in your budget, okay? This is in the city manager's $6 million budget that went up from an estimated 2.6 the previous year estimate actual. So, I mean, forget about 66 million. Your estimated 2009 fiscal year total was going to be 2.6, and your budget submitted was 6 million, and the major difference is this 3.4 million. So, you know, to me, that's completely unreasonable that someone wouldn't know why their budget went from 2.6 to over $6 million, and what that main line item is.
And I will answer that question. What that is, that consists of basically 2 line items that we have had problems accounting for over the years. They have been in different departments. One of those is developer reimbursements on the sales tax agreements that we receive. And the other one is a fund that was set aside, and this year was set aside as we did the budget reductions to take care of any item that we may have cut a little bit too far. We haven't touched much of that latter one, is the good news. We did initially, back in July, have to bring on an additional building inspector when we drilled that too deep. So there's about $1,900,000, I believe, that was included in that number that represents sales tax reimbursements. The previous couple of years, those were in the finance department. Before that, that was in the economic development department. We did this, and we set up a new department that we called non-departmental. However, in the presentation, it's shown as part of the city manager's budget. That's what those items are. And actually, as we get into the details of the ongoing expenditures, in both cases, we pull those numbers out of those budgets in those discussions, and I'll be doing that a little bit later.
So, in large measure, it's a placeholder.
Yes, it is.
Thanks.
Yes, Evelyn.
This is actually
One other quick question. Your 511 employees, how many days per year are they granted sick leave?
Is it 12?
Yes, sir.
12 days.
Okay, so from an economic standpoint, is there a loss to the city when a person is sick? Do you hire a substitute for them, or is there, I mean, how do you quantify those sick days, and monetarily, what does that do to the city when someone is gone?
It depends on which department that person's in. In the fire department, because of constant staffing, we have to bring back somebody, and then we're paying overtime. And so that would, because they need 4 men per truck, and so that one they would be filling. Police, if they fall below 6 people, they will have to bring back somebody to fill in. And all the rest probably are not brought, that person is sick, they're off, and that's it. So.
And so when you instituted your wellness program, that was just a service to your employees for quality of life? Because I don't see it relating to cost savings with regard to less use of sick leave days.
It is directly related to cost savings. The program's new enough that it still hasn't taken complete hold, but our insurance carrier who is helping pay for it, it definitely is related to cost savings.
Okay, and so they are collecting data then to know the difference in whether or not
Yes, we are.
the program is having an effect on the reduced number of sick leave days?
Yes, we are. Al?
I remember in reading the Matrix, the report, they made a comment on fire and the engines, about the number on each of those engines.
Of 4 men?
Yeah. Was that ever resolved? I mean, I think they recommend 3. I have no idea why.
The recommendation may have been for 3. We are under contract with the Phoenix metropolitan area on the automatic call response program to have 4 men per truck. And so whenever we have a fire here in Goodyear, there will be trucks coming also from Avondale and other cities. And likewise in Avondale, we will be responding. And that's why they demand that there be 4 firefighters per truck. It is an issue nationwide. I will tell you this. I was on the board of directors of the Poudre Fire Authority in Fort Collins, Colorado. We covered a 250 square mile area with the fire service. We had 3 men per truck, and the people always fought for 4 men per truck, but because of financial reasons, we would never agree to it. So Fort Collins today is still 3 men per truck.
Yeah, coming from New York City, I'm well aware of the fire department issue nationwide. And they cut down hundreds, it seems, sometimes. I just was curious why Matrix even went that far to say that. I mean, they should have known better.
I don't know. That was a totally, staff was out of that study. That was a study that was prepared for and by the City Council, and that was submitted. What they knew or didn't know, I don't know.
We questioned it, I assume. Yeah.
Okay. Yes?
Marvin Fair, do we ever pay employees for unused sick time or unused vacation time, and how much does that represent each year?
Was it 140 this year?
Unused sick leave, the only time that we pay an employee is when they leave the city, and it's up to 60 days.
And you have to be with the city a certain time before you get that. Okay, I am sorry, I misunderstood the question because I thought you were asking about vacation buyback. We also have that, and that was about 140 this year. And that is something that I also announced this year as we did it, that was budgeted, that we were going to keep our commitments, but that don't expect, again, it's not automatic this next year. And that program, and then there was one other, the health savings retirement, is one that would cost us about $130,000. And that one I also said we will do this year because it's budgeted last year. And but we're looking at it for this next year. Al?
Do we have sick banks where the staff or the employee accumulates over a period of time they're absent or their days, and at the end when they retire or leave, we pay them back?
Boy, Kate, come up here. Yes, we do. We have several different programs. One of them I just found out this year, because you go over a certain number of hours, and we automatically take some and send it to the retirement fund to help employees pay for medical insurance after.
There's actually on sick leave no maximum number of accruals, so you can continue on forever. We used to have 720 in place, and then we thought, why? You keep your attendance in excellent condition over the years, then you have cancer, your wife has cancer, you have this ability to take sick leave days. What didn't change when that became unlimited was the 60 days of payout. So when you leave the city, you cannot accumulate, cannot be given more than 60 days of sick leave that you've earned, so that you have on the books. So that financial liability did not change.
So there's no formula or equation out there that would do 2 for 1, that kind of thing? Because I've heard reports sometimes these people have like 1 million days in there. I've worked with things like that.
We really think highly of those folks that work over the years and come to work every day and continue working.
I remember.
And so we want to encourage that great attendance, but we didn't increase the liability any at payout.
Do you pay it out on one lump sum?
Yes.
Why?
And why? Well,
For tax purposes. I'm asking because I've seen it effectively. We can spread out over a number of years, and they benefit by the tax. The city benefits by not having to put those. I have no idea what the figures are, but you do save money.
we implemented what's called, I think, a 401A plan, and to where that employee can put that money in pre-tax into that plan, and so that takes care of the tax problem.
Okay.
Sir?
Has the city ever done an analysis on eliminating the accumulation of sick leave and going to short-term, long-term disability programs, more like an insurance, and would that be cost-effective or not?
We have a short-term disability program now, and it's self-administered by the city, so that removes some of the cost for administration. We also have long-term disabilities through the retirement programs.
But you also have accumulated sick leave?
Yes,
So
sir.
you have all three of them then?
Wow.
See, I've been in places where you get 48 hours of sick leave July 1st. The city had a 100% 90-day short-term disability program. Then they had, that kicked on with that, they had a 90-day long-term disability program. So the 6 months, you got 100% of your pay if you were still out, and then that was it. Then you qualified for Social Security or Arizona Retirement System or whatever, public safety retirement system.
We can give you the
Those employees that didn't use those 48 hours they're given at July 1st, they were paid off the last payday in June, then they started all over again. But one of the things about unended accumulated sick leave, which I was an employee here and I benefited from the current program, is that you're not paid what you earned it at. You're paid when you leave, which is always higher than how you earned it. So.
But you're only paid a portion.
But the long-term, short-term disability program, once you figure out how to keep the employees whole that have this accumulated time on board, is more cost-efficient as an insurance program than it is long-term unlimited sick leave.
We'll give you the details of our short-term program and also of our sick leave so that you all have that available to you.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else? Yeah.
John, Rain Gray. I wanted to piggyback on Evelyn's question. Is the savings realized in premiums when it comes to the wellness program? A reduced insurance premium?
Yes, but that's hard to measure because the reductions, the increases keep coming, but they tell us that they're less than they would be. So it's very difficult to quantify that.
One other question was, what type of revenue are we looking at with fire protection for Litchfield Park?
In the $400,000 to $500,000 range, with no increased costs from our standpoint.
I don't necessarily disagree or agree with the idea that the city's general fund is in the problem because of the annexation and the ball field. To me, it's more fundamental than that. As long as the city council desires to adopt operating budgets that are structurally upside down, meaning their operating expenditures exceed their operating revenues, you're always going to have this type of up and down problem. It's like that chart you showed with the permitting process, where revenues are up and then they're coming back down, and these are your costs. Well, those additional revenues are one-time revenues. You issue a permit and you stop issuing permits, they're gone. But if you build fire stations and parks and police beats, when it's gone, what do you do? So as long as council is willing to adopt an operating budget that is upside down, they're always going to have these problems sooner or later. So how do you solve the problem after you've taken all the low-hanging fruit? Well, you're challenged with that, and like you said, they'll get a balanced budget proposal come March, April, or May, whenever you give it to them. But services, you're not going to continue to raise taxes because that doesn't necessarily generate dollars for you.
Just one comment to you, Larry. The council only votes on the budgets that they're presented by the city manager. And
not necessarily true. Since I played that game for 11 years with this council, our councils, they have total input. It is their budget. They wrap their arms around it. Staff is trying to regurgitate to them and present to them what they've said they wanted. So, and if they don't like what staff gives them, they send it back, because I've experienced that before. Or they vote no. I've experienced that before. So it isn't like staff is giving them something foreign that's just dropping out of space to them. It is council's budget. They own it. They take it on.
well, I know from one city council meeting here that, in fact, that the mayor had requested from the city manager that he develop 3 separate budgets that did not require a tax increase and submit it back to council, and council would review each budget and choose one of those budgets to accept as their budget. That never happened.
Well, you have to remember the city manager works for 7 individuals.
Thank you.
And I guarantee you, if 4 of them would have told him to do that, they would have got it.
Thank you, because that is the exact point. I mean, nobody seconded what his request was. Gary?
I want to comment. I have gone to many city council meetings, and I have seen Larry do budget presentations, and I have seen Larry present 70 new positions that staff and council have authorized. And I have watched sometimes 20 of those positions get wiped out because council didn't want to spend the money. So council minutely manages every position in this city. The city manager follows the direction of the four council people. That is a majority of the thing. The mayor is 1 vote on this council. The mayor does not run the city. The mayor is the inspirational leader of the city, and the mayor can set direction and course. But if council doesn't want to follow him, it's not going to happen. So, and I have seen placeholders in city budgets. I have seen $40 million placeholders put in the city budget. And I have never heard anybody question, why do we have this placeholder of $40 million? We have the placeholder of $40 million because if you don't budget it, you can't spend it, even if you have more revenue than the budget says you are. So there are lots of games that are played in government budgeting, and it is not, and we've heard this many, many times, it is not corporate accounting. And you don't report to stockholders, and you don't report to the SEC.
But you report to the citizens of Goodyear.
They vote.
They don't vote on the budget.
Well, but they should vote.
They vote on the council people, and if they don't like them, they have the opportunity to either recall them, and they can bring that petition to any time they want. You can get 10% of the people to recall any council member of that's on there, and that is your privilege. If you don't like what's going on, I suggest you start a recall petition.
Evelyn?
John, I compliment you on your work with your cooperative agreement with Litchfield Park. I think that's a positive step in bringing revenue, provided you can share the employees and have the capacity to do that. Are you considering any other cooperative agreements? In the past, I've heard of cooperative agreements for shared beds and jail space, for library services, for a lot of things where, you know, it's possible to do. Are there others in the works?
Not that are close to fruition, but, well, this morning I had breakfast with Charlie McClendon from Avondale, and we were exploring several potential areas that we could work closer together. So it's a great, in my estimation, it's a great way to get additional revenues in if you can somehow consolidate services with another city or take on one of the services for that other city. The other areas, but it doesn't mean big money, that I think we just approved a couple weeks ago a joint agreement with the city of Buckeye on building services so we can exchange people. And we just, I think, approved that also with Litchfield Park. So areas like that, yes, we are constantly seeking areas.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Paula? Yeah, let's take 5. We're going to discuss economic development next and communication. And what I didn't mention at the beginning of the evening was that, as you know, it wasn't on the original agenda, but we're bringing back the summary of the monthly actuals, the year-to-date actuals, which we'll do as the third point tonight. Before we jump into economic development, just one thing, because that 753 didn't set right with anybody. It didn't set right with me. So we went back and looked at the materials from the evening that Public Works had their discussion. And if you want to refer to it, it's page 14 on the Public Works presentation. I think what somebody did was took a dot out, because what it comes down to is 73.5 hours per signal per year. And I can tell you from my personal experience, that's very much within the realm of reality. There's obligations and there's bulb changes that are mandatory and things like that. But if you look at it, you're going to see 4,526 hours dedicated to that, 62 signals. Divide one into the other, and it comes out to about 73.5. And I think somebody just took out a dot there. So I just want to put that one to rest.
What page was that?
That was on page 14 on the Public Works presentation.
What was the date on that? Do you remember?
The date of the Public Works presentation, about February 10th.
I'm looking at the
Yes, sir.
14 of 216.
Yeah. So, and I just checked on that and did the quick math, and that makes a whole lot more sense.
What are you saying is the right number there instead of 4526?
Well, I did this without calculator, but I'm going to say it's about 73 and a half, give or take, hours per
segment.
If you take 62 into 4526.
That should be a period and a comma across.
So we have 4,526 hours dedicated to 62 signals. Those 70-something, but I think I'm pretty darn close there.
Yes.
It's just not 730-some, and that was the point I wanted to make. That number is simply way outside the limits, and I think it's simply because of a period. So if I might, we will turn it over to Paula on economic development and communications.
Thank you. I'm sure you're all excited to have another presentation from what I'm hearing anyway. So I'll try to make this brief. As the department head of economic development, my background is about 22 years in city government, 7 with the city of Goodyear in mostly communications, and prior to that I was marketing director for the city of Glendale for 15 years. Before that, I was in the private sector. At Dial Soap, I was the senior product manager on Tone Soap, which is a $30 million profit center, so basically I ran a business. Then I went into new product development for Dial, and the last thing I did before I left was introduce Liquid Dial into the marketplace, which I assume you all have heard of. Before that, I was in market research in Cincinnati and designed questionnaires and did analysis, and mostly for Procter & Gamble. And before that, I was with Leo Burnett Advertising in Tony the Tiger and Kellogg and a few of those other kinds.
I worked on that account.
And I have about, I don't know what Gary just said, I have about 30 hours toward an MBA at ASU, but I have a degree from DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana. That's Indiana, not DePaul in Chicago. The Economic Development Department basically is here to help the city become sustainable. We promote and protect the city's image. That's one of the key things that communications does. And the Economic Development Division attracts and retains businesses in order to help expand the city's employment and sales tax base. The history of the department is the Economic Development Department has existed for about 15 years and grew to 5 employees over time. The Communications Office began in 2001 as a part of, it says community initiatives, that became the Community Services Department, which is now defunct. And in 2006, I moved to the city manager's office, and it was a one-woman department basically for 5 years, and then it grew to 4 people over an 8-year time period. Then in 2009-10, the city manager decided to merge these 2 sort of small units together, and it really made us more efficient. We were sort of duplicating some of the things because we both marketed the city, and we got economies of scale. And one of the things now is we're set up much more like the private sector in having a marketing arm of the city and a sales force arm for the city. This is the org chart with the Economic Development Director, and I have an administrative assistant like everyone else. The Economic Development Division consists of the Economic Development Manager and then a Senior Office Industrial Development Manager. It's a huge name title, and basically who's in charge of attracting industrial and office. We had a special position, the one you see in yellow, which is frozen, for retail, doing the same thing. Now, when that person left the city, we froze that position because obviously there's not a lot of retail activity going on now, and so the one person we have left can handle any retail that comes through. Prior to that, the Economic Development Department had a business advocate too. That position basically would take care mostly of the businesses that are here currently, and when we did layoffs, we laid off that position, and that was absorbed within the rest of the department. On the communications side, we have a PIO. I was the PIO, and I was the web person, and I was the graphic designer for a while. And so we now have a PIO who specializes in media relations and gets us a lot of press, I can tell you. A webmaster who does that full-time rather than only 10% of her time when she was in the IT department. And a graphic designer which supports the entire city. So what was originally 5 people in economic development and 4 in communications has come together with a 2-person reduction, and it's a 22% reduction in staff. So I want to give you an overview and basically compare us to the private sector at this point. You look at communications almost as a marketing and PR arm. We're like an in-house public relations firm. We actually act as an in-house advertising agency because our graphic artist makes everything camera ready. When we buy advertising, we do our own media buying. We do get a 15% discount just like any ad agency would get. Because of my market research background, we do the coordination effort there for the city, and we also do the corporate communications, as many of you who've been in the corporate world would know that there's departments that do corporate communications. So the Economic Development Division actually acts as our sales force. You have the marketing arm, and you have, in a sense, the sales force. Together, we pursue key target markets. Communication is more the citizens and the employees and some local business. That's where we would cross over together. Our main key target is the local, state, and national media, the e-visitors, the people that come to our website, and tourists. The Economic Development Division is more into targeting local, regional, state, national, and global businesses, and the brokerage and development community. So we have separate targets, but we're all marketing the city as one. So first of all, I'll start with communications and what we do. We have 4 things: marketing, community relations, basically communications to the citizens and employees, citywide graphic support service, and media relations. What we call marketing and communications, we really do promote and protect the city's image, not from just what we do, but what every department puts out from this city. We do advertising, magazine, and newspaper ads. We lay them out, we buy them. For instance, at public meetings, you'll see ads in the newspaper. We would do those. writing marketing articles, the collateral materials, just about anything that goes out of the city. We would write the award entries for all the departments. We also develop huge marketing campaigns. When we won the All-America City Award, then we needed a marketing campaign to tell the world we won its most prestigious award. And we've also developed Kirby sanitation campaign when we started into recycling, and the baseball campaign, which both won national awards for the best marketing campaigns in a municipality in the country 2 years in a row. So we also had in our budget event sponsorships. There are nonprofits and groups that come to the city and say, we'd like you to pay and be a sponsor of our events. And so when times were good and we had a lot of money, we would sponsor those kind of events. Then we started, as a city, growing and holding a lot more of our own events that we hadn't held in the past as a young city. And so we've done away with most sponsorships to outside organizations except for the symphony, and are concentrating on our own events that we host ourselves. We do the event coordination for most of the city things, from grand openings, groundbreakings, grand openings, open houses for all municipal facilities. Just for spring training last year, we did 17 separate events. And then we do the surveys, as you know.
Paula? This is Bill Stipp. The spring training advertising.
That's under the ballpark.
Right. Are we advertising for the games? I don't want to hate to sound completely ignorant, but it would seem to me that there's an advantage for the Reds and the Indians to do marketing for their spring training games as opposed to the city taking on that responsibility. Can you explain?
The only thing I'm not doing is ballpark. So that's a question we need to ask. You need to ask when Mike Svets is up.
Okay.
Because they're doing their own advertising.
So on this
and
last
marketing.
slide, when you talked about spring training, 17 spring training events last year, you're not referring to baseball?
Yes, and I'll show you. But those are events to the public. Fan days, we did 5 media tour days. We did 2 VIP events. You know, when the Reds opened or when the Indians opened their facility, and then when we opened the ballpark. And we had Cactus League breakfast, and it was just our department was in charge of them. We didn't necessarily pay for them. The ballpark paid most of the expenses, but we put on those events for the city.
Okay. Thank you.
Quick question. In your advertising campaigns to promote the city, do you take advantage of those websites that are frequented by visitors who come to the Southwest? For instance, if you were to go to cactusleague.com, do you have a pop-up or a banner or anything on that website that would promote Goodyear?
We have a link from our website to cactusleague.com. They're sort of independent. It's mostly cities that attach to them as opposed to them attaching back to cities.
But it's just a link, not an actual promotion.
No, it's a link. Now, on baseball, my department did more of the advertising and layout prior to anyone really being on board to do it at the ballpark. So we did some back in '09 that all now has been taken over by all the people that have been hired to work at the ballpark. Examples of these are some of these type of ads. U.S. Airways will do a special edition, for instance, a Cactus League edition. And so we wanted to be in those kind of publications to let the world know that we were going to have a ballpark. For instance, the ad you see that says, Goodyear is saving a seat for you with a view, sitting in the middle of the desert, was because we had no ballpark. We had nothing to show, but we said, you know, at this point, buy your tickets for next year when we have something. There are other tourism publications that are done in the West Valley, Arizona avenues that are official publications. That's when we would do the ad that's touristy, like where the ping of the club meets the crack of the bat type of thing, in order to try to promote tourism. These are the examples of the marketing campaigns. Besides working on all of the materials to get sponsorships at the ballpark, we did. Hopefully you'll recognize the Kirby brochures because you all got them. Hopefully it helped. The Goodyear All-America campaign and the Water H2O 365 water conservation campaign. Here's the event planning, 17 events, 10 were for the public to attend.
Question.
What are you pointing
Al.
to?
Al.
Oh, Al?
You have a question?
I have a question.
Tonight I was watching on the news that one of the Chicago teams wants another stadium or something like that in Mesa. Can we get stuff like that advertised out?
Can you get it advertised?
Can we get something related to our ballpark?
Mean in the newspaper?
I don't mean right now, think on it. I mean something down the road, because the spring training season is very short. But if we have things like that on Channel 3, let's say, more of the community will get to know what we have here, and they'll come out.
Yes, and we do that, and we do a pretty good job of that, as you'll see as I go on. The communications is the second thing we do with citizens and employees. Basically, we put out publications. You all get the In Focus. We put out 154 pages of that. Same page, 24 pages. That's our employee newsletter, which we stopped and started again. The rec catalog, which comes now attached to the In Focus, 64 pages that we lay out. Annual report, which we wrote and laid out, and the water quality report. On the website, we manage both the external website and the internal one, which is for employees, and it's our intranet. I don't have statistics on the intranet, but I do on the external website. This is the first year we have good statistics on the external website. We're hosted, we don't host ourselves, we're hosted by Civic Plus in Manhattan, Kansas, and we had web trends before. They were never accurate. We could tell that we couldn't understand what numbers we were getting. Now we have a new one, and the numbers are very consistent. Last year we created a new website. We worked on 15,000 pages last year. This year, just keeping it up, we've created 1,500. We send like 1,100 e-notifies to 15,600 subscribers. We have about, I think, 16 different e-notifies people can sign up for now. We put about 2,500 news flashes on the homepage. Those are things that come up that are critical and timely, and then they go away after 2 or 3, 4 days. What you see here is the number of visits is about 800,000 in a year. Number of pages viewed is 2.3 million. That averages about 3 pages per visit to the website. From our conferences, we find that that's pretty average for a municipality. And the unique visitors were almost 500,000 in 2009. A lot of that is because of baseball. And we saw an incredible spike in the months before spring training, when people who were very unique and probably never heard of the city of Goodyear before were coming to our website. And then it leveled off after spring training again. And the returning visitors are about 300,000, and hopefully those are a lot of our own citizens. The average length of a visit was a minute, and that doesn't sound like long, but according to the conferences we go to, that's good, because it says if they're looking at 3 pages and they're getting in and they're getting out, then they're finding it easily and they're getting what they were looking for. So I said we also do the citywide graphics function. We produce a graphics manual which tells everyone how they can use the city's logo on a car, on a T-shirt, on a hat, on a publication, no matter where it is. And our graphic designer is the logo cop. He also designs logos for other programs as an official city photographer. Does, as I said, all the work that comes out of the city is camera ready, so the printers, we pay less for printing from that standpoint. He writes and lays out all of the publications and all the collateral materials that come out of the city except for the ballpark. The graphic support is, he basically did 217 projects last year, and I can tell you that that's a lot. When I was in the city of Glendale, I had 4 graphic artists in my department, and they did about 600 in a year. So I have 1 doing 200 now, so it's pretty productive. The center one you see is the Goodyear, that we had 9 pages in U.S. Airways, for instance, just talking about the city. It was a special edition that had a special advertorial on Goodyear, and we sold sponsorships to companies and things in order to pay for the 9 pages that we got in U.S. Airways. These are other examples of things. The bottom one, left one is a sign, so we do our own signage. The budget cover, the annual report, and door hangers. So that's a colorful portion. Yes.
Oh, excuse me, I'm Joan Shield. On this, I'm looking at one of the pictures here. It looks like the one that was on the budget. So you produced the budget?
No, we produce
The graphic
design for the budgets.
The color graphics design for
right.
them. Can you tell me, how many budgets do you produce that are like this?
Oh, Larry would have to answer that. I don't know. 50 or 75? 50?
And are they pretty much for in-house for employees?
Normally.
Would there be much of a savings if all the in-house or employee use information that you produce, that if it was produced in black and white instead of colored, that what the difference would be?
Sometimes, I don't know if color works, adds to it, but we've won the award for budgets every year, and that's basically what every city in the country almost does. And so I honestly don't know if that's part of the rating process, but Larry might know if it's part of the rating process. But it's been in color. 50 of those in color digitally doesn't cost much.
So
covers like that. Digital printing these days is pretty darn cheap.
Do we do our own printing?
No. We go to digital presses. They're pretty cheap. It's not like when you go to big, huge presses. Say from a media relations standpoint, our goal is to get as much publicity as possible because this is free advertising for us. We do this through press releases. That's about 165 a year. Media pitches to the media, where we literally call them up and tell them about our possibility and talk them into coming. We answered about over 700 media inquiries from the media last year, managed about 16 live interviews. I mean, when somebody's coming, we work with the person who's going to be doing the interview, make sure that the cameras can be set up right. And we also photograph 14 events in addition to what the official photographer does. We do internal media consulting and many times do talking points for the mayor and council so that if there's an issue, they all are on the same page, say if the press is going to call them and ask them about this issue, and prep most of the management and staff before major interviews. We also do the media production. We have that person is on contract, it's not an employee. That person films all of the council meetings and the P&Z meetings and the work sessions. It's about 45 or 50 a year, and in addition to that, we have him go out and do about 26 other productions for us that we put on the website. Now, you ask about the value of what we do. One of the things we do is track it, because as any advertising or PR agency would do, they have to know the value of their work. So we've worked with a lot of PR agencies asking them how they did it, and we measure the value of the free publicity by the inch, whether it's A1, above the line, below the line, with a picture, online. Did we get a video online? Did we get a photograph? Everything has a weight and a factor and a cost to it. If you're in the Republic versus the West Valley View versus the Southwest Valley Republic, or the Wall Street Journal, if you get in there, those kind of things. So basically, we had $10.3 million worth of positive publicity. If it's negative publicity, we subtract it from that amount. Like if you just found a body in Goodyear, that to us is negative publicity. When the police arrest the person who did the crime, that's positive publicity in our minds, because then if they're solving the crime. So that's how we do it. But we take negative publicity away, and it was $10.3 million worth of positive. A lot of that last year was baseball. We tracked baseball separately because we were doing so much. And we have the numbers from Ohio and those newspapers as well. And the value of all that publicity was $3.1 million that we got free, basically, for baseball. The rest of the publicity was worth 7.2. Now, Suntech this year, for instance, is similar to baseball for us last year. We knew we were getting a lot of press instantly. We were getting worldwide press. We called ad agencies, said, how do you do worldwide press? We don't know what their ad rates are and stuff. And they said, base it on the Republic and just go from there. And so basically using their techniques, so far we've garnered about $1.8 million in positive publicity with Suntech, with most of that money being in the Valley as opposed to Australia and other places where we did find articles. So the efficiencies overall of the communications division, back when it was in the city manager's office to today, starting in with FY07 to 10, we've cut the operating budget by about 60% with $227,000 from year to year. As I said, we stopped doing a lot of the events. $75,000 of that was from the outside events. We did a rodeo for years and never grew. People didn't attend much. The Tres Rios was in our city and then moved to Avondale. But Fiestas Patrias is in Avondale, and they didn't even ask for funding, and neither did Relay for Life last year's. So that's where we were able to cut some of our funding. We stopped almost all of our tourism advertising, and we cut public meeting ads. We used to try to run 3 and 4 ads in the newspaper to make sure people saw it. Like if you're on vacation this week, you can't say you didn't see it because we ran it the next week. Because that's what everyone says. You held a public meeting and we didn't see it and you didn't tell us, right? So we try to run a lot of ads besides putting it in focus so people have an opportunity to see it in many places. We also cut a lot of the video production that we were doing except for meetings. Then we cut the travel like everybody else did. The other thing that we made major cuts on was in focus. In the beginning, in 06-07, we were spending $7 a year to talk to your household, to communicate with you. And actually, I didn't think that was a lot of money. I think I'm worth $7 a year to this city, personally. But eventually I realized that, the rec department was putting out a rec catalog and mailing it to 4 times a year, and we were putting out and focus and mailing 4 times a year. So I said, if we put these together, we can save the mailing costs. So we put them together and saved $20,000 in mailing costs. And that first year, we were able to use that money to do a campaign for all America cities because we had no budget. We didn't know we were going to, the citizens were going to put us in for this award. And so hopefully you've seen the decals All America on our traffic lights and pins and things like that. We paid for that with the money saved the first year from the In Focus mailing. After that, it went into true savings. Then when we had to cut again, we went from 12 issues to 10. We saved another $20,000. Then when things got more dire and we had to cut more, we basically cut $75,000 out of it. We went down to 6 issues. We cut from the 16 pages to 8. We did a lighter stock of paper to save us money. So from that standpoint, we've cut $115,000 just out of In Focus. Another thing.
Can't we have the option to send an email to the residents?
We do, but it wouldn't reach everybody, and that's the problem. This way, we're guaranteed to get it into everyone's home. If we send it via email, you have to decide whether you're going to open your email and read it. It's on there right now for you to sign up and e-notify, and we certainly don't have 24,000 households signed up to receive In Focus by e-notify. We know from talking to our citizens, there are a lot of people who do not want to read 8 or 24 pages online.
Well, I know a lot of people who just put it on the coffee table and they don't even read it.
And that could be the case.
I get a lot of professional stuff, PDF filed on emailed every day, and I pick and choose. You got to make it worthwhile for me to open it up.
I would say that your odds are somewhat...
I would open yours up.
The younger people would be more inclined to do that, but we found age-wise, it's generally over 45 are the ones who are generally not so inclined to read it online. They'd rather read it in
that speaks
hard
to
copy.
your survey of landline communication.
And we added one other efficiency where we're also mailing the water quality survey out to every household. By law, federal law, you have to do that. So we worked with the water department. They're an enterprise fund. They're not from the general fund. And so we said, if we could go together and we could put yours inside and In Focus, then we could save the mailing and the printing, and we could get a 7th issue of In Focus out to the people. And if you would pay for the printing, and we'll pay for the postage. So we partnered, and now we have 7 issues instead of 6. So that's just an example of what we try to do to become more efficient.
Paula, excuse me, was there ever a thought that if we could save the money and the money that was saved, instead of printing the seventh issue, just leave it in the department to cover other expenses and not mail out a seventh issue?
Well, actually, it ended up costing us $3,000 for postage. We didn't really save on that. We saved, in a sense, the two departments, more water, saved their postage costs. We just really wanted to be able to communicate more with the people. At a cost of only $3,000 to us is cheap versus the normal cost per month. Yes?
What's your circulation?
24,000 households. It goes to every household in Goodyear and business. It's rural carrier sort, and so the carrier takes it to every household on their route.
P.O. boxes.
Including P.O. boxes, yeah. And apartments.
And I think the thing that's overlooked is that there's an intangible benefit by doing that, because all those coffee tables that gets left on, visitors in those homes read that, and you do get a return on your investment by that knowledge being out there in those homes, and that's something that is hard to quantify.
Well, and the point of leaving it on the coffee table versus reading it online and letting it go, because when I was in the city of Glendale, we put it inside the water bill, and what we found out from research was the person that opened the water bill is the person that read it, and the spouse never even half the time knew it existed because they weren't the person that opened the bill. So that's one of the reasons we've been trying to send it. As a small city like we are now, the costs are possible to send it in home. If you're the size of Phoenix, you couldn't. Then you have to put it in the water bill or something like that. So it seemed like an opportunity for now while we're a small city. Mm-hmm.
Paula, Gary Gilzer. This is for Al. As you asked about whether the City Council micromanages this, in last year's budget, In Focus was wiped out, and then they found $115,000 to produce In Focus and took it out of the arts budget for this year. So that's where the money came from, and I remember being at that meeting when that happened.
Yeah, we offered it up as a cut, but council thought it was important enough to keep it.
This is Bill Stipp. Do you know what the cost to produce one In Focus is?
One single In Focus?
An edition. You know what I'm...
Oh.
An issue.
An issue, thank you.
About 12,000 when it includes the rec catalog, and about 8,000 when it doesn't.
So about $8,000? And then about $3,000 in mailing?
Right.
So it's roughly 11?
11 to 15.
Okay, thank you.
So when they asked for mid-year cuts in 09-10, we cut, I'd say now we cut early to the bone, and we're a member of the chamber, and as the city, we try to be good corporate citizens and advertise in their directory or on their map that they put out, but at this point, we cut everything out. So, we're hurting them as well, but that just has to be. And we cut our video production to just meetings. We now put one ad, and we have even though the In Focus comes out every other month now, and sometimes if you don't even know there's going to be a public meeting, we'll miss it because the public meeting happens within the 2-month time frame. But we still only do one ad in the newspaper now and hope people see them. The last thing that we finally cut, and we tried to save as long as possible, was the visitor's guide for everybody coming for the ballpark, but that finally went as well. So that won't be produced next year. So in total, we cut it over $250,000 since basically 06-07 budget. Now, economic development. There's really 3 key things to economic development. They participate a great deal in regional efforts for economic development in the Valley. We have to all work together. None of us have the money to do it on our own. We work to attract industrial office, but at the same time, we don't just try to bring them here. We have to work with the businesses that are here to try to make sure we maintain them. As I said, we have global, worldwide is where Suntech came from China. There's no way that Goodyear could afford to try to get someone from China on our own. So we go with GPEC. We are a member of GPEC, as is almost every Valley city. It costs us 40 cents per head, which is about $25,000. And GPEC is the one then who markets us worldwide, markets the Valley worldwide. When they come into the Valley, then GPEC will send out an usually anonymous form from them that says, okay, I have GPEC client 2345. They are a manufacturer. They want 500,000 square feet. They're a high water user. They want rail spur. They want to be by, a major freeway. And so then we submit sites to them, and then the hope is that you make the short list. Well, right now, we are on the short list for 3 solar companies and 2 manufacturing companies. So that's really good. And that doesn't count just landing Suntech. So as you can tell, Solar Bill 1403 really, really has helped. I mean, there are many solar companies that have come to talk to us. Other regional partnerships are Westmark. Maybe you've heard of that. They represent all of the 13 Western Maricopa cities. We work with them right now on creating a foreign trade zone. We're working on changing our enterprise zone with them. We worked with them to do a West Valley workforce study, which has been very helpful. And Harry Paxton, who's our economic development manager, is mostly the person who works. He's worked diligently on this. He worked on 1403, and works in the partnership mostly with all of the other cities. We also work with the Department of Commerce, the community colleges, the Arizona Association of Economic Development and Utilities, and for retail, the Regional Association for International Council of Shopping Centers. To just show you how much it takes from a regional standpoint, these are all the people that were involved in landing Suntech. First of all, the ACC is the Arizona Corporation Commission. They set the standard that said that the utilities needed 15% renewable energy by 2025. Okay, then the governor and the legislature passed 1403. So GPEC then made trips to China. This hit so fast by us developing these incentives, and the state saw results immediately. ADOC, which Department of Commerce was involved, APS for their utility needs. ASU has been working with them for 4 years, which is one of the key reasons they came to the Valley. That's probably the key reason that we competed with Tempe for them. Very much everybody in the world everybody in this valley thought I was going to Tempe, so we just sort of snuck in there and took them. We also worked with their developers broker, and the developer, which is Duke Realty out of Indianapolis, and the Suntech's broker and Suntech's attorney, who acted as their relocation person, and then solar associations they belong to, and the Maricopa workforce, which helps us with job training. So you can see this is very complicated, and all these people are working on it at the same time. That's, I would say, hundreds of phone calls that were made by the Economic Development Department between all of these people, tracking it and figuring out what's the next move. So we said, in this attraction process, I want you to remember 3 key words: leads, prospects, and locates. A lead is somebody that shows interest. A prospect is somebody who really shows up on our doorstep, who wants to know more about the city, who really looks at a site. A locate is somebody who picks a site, signs a lease, or builds a building, or maybe expands their firm. So it's sort of like fishing. My son's a fisherman. He told me it's called reading the pond. So we develop leads. How do we do that? We go to trade shows and work trade shows and trying to get industry leads. We work closely with the brokers and developers around the valley. And we respond to GPEC and Department of Commerce leads. Then we bait the hook. So we really cultivate those prospects. We give them all the site selection assistance possible. I mean, we're the ones who hold their hand when they get here. We develop proposals for them to show them, if they're in avionics, what the Valley offers in avionics. If it's healthcare, what the Valley offers in healthcare. What's the workforce that they have waiting for them here in the Valley? And if it's retail, what are the demographics that exist in a 5, 10, 15-mile radius of where they'd like to locate? Then we reel them in, and we call that locating them. And we do that with, we utilize recruitment tools and signed agreements. Now, you probably want to know, what are some of those recruitment tools? Now, most of those they're performance-based, and the solar energy bill is a good example. The state offered tax advantages for solar if they met minimum capital investment requirements, and if they paid above the average median, 125% above the average median wage which is about $38,000, and if they paid 80% of the benefits, then they could qualify for these tax advantages. That's why so many of them have come looking now in Arizona. We call it fast tracking the city process. We do plan reviews. Normally, we have a 30 business day plan review process. Well, our plan review people have cooperated so enormously with us, they've agreed to go down to 3 days on these types of projects so we can help attract them. And that's a lot of work for that department, especially now that they don't have as many people. So we know time is money. And one of the key things, one of the things that CTCA will say that we do the best. We had to even rezone the land the CTCA is on. But we went from zoning to groundbreaking to grand opening in a year with that company. And even they will say that's unheard of for a city to work that fast. So we're really proud of the departments and how they can pull together for these projects. The Western Maricopa Enterprise Zone, if they hire people from enough enterprise zones, the whole West Valley is an enterprise zone, but they have them in other cities too. If they hire 35% of their population, of their employment from those enterprise zones, then they can get $3,000 per employee if they qualify. And there's a million things they have to qualify for and a lot of details. But a foreign trade zone, which we're now developing, and we have two. We have Palm Valley 303, which is a big building you see at the corner of Indian School and Cotton 303. When you take 303, that's going to be a foreign trade zone. And then there's another area of just land that's a foreign trade zone. Think of that like a duty-free shop, and they can save a lot of money if they import materials and things from overseas. And it's very valuable to them, and they get definite tax advantages. Job training, the state used to do $8,000, about $8,000 average per job. Well, that was swept. There is no money anymore for job training in the state. Then the county had some, and the county had none. And so at the time that we were doing Suntech, no one had money. And so we offered job training funds from the city. And since then, we have found that the county now has job training funds again, and so we'll probably be able to get funding from the county. It won't all have to come from the city. There's also sales tax rebates, and those have to be for proven benefit to the city. An example would be, how all the roads are done around the mall right now. Well, Westcor and the other landowners put all those in, and eventually they will be paid back for them after they perform and bring in taxes. Then they will get sales tax rebates for putting in all those roads. That's a very simple explanation of that.
Paula, how about the GPLET tool?
Okay, GPLET tool. I think my next slide talks about redevelopment zones. Let me see if it's the next slide. No. But anyway, we have a redevelopment area in our city, and it stretches from the basically down Litchfield, from I-10 to Broadway, Dysart over to the Bullard Wash. And that's like includes the oldest area of the city. And that's when sometimes you hear people complaining that they've been called slum and blight. It's a federal term that you have to use. Anyway, the city and the council approved this area as a redevelopment area back in 2006. You can do special incentives thanks to House Bill 2515, right, Harry? He has all those details.
Well, the GPLET allows you to do an 8-year tax abatement is the biggest benefit for real property taxes. And then also you can extend that where it becomes a government property lease excise tax is what it stands for. And so after that 8-year period, for a period of time you're able to negotiate up to 50 years, they're offered a lease excise tax.
It's basically an in lieu tax, and for instance, CTCA would buy the land, but they would convey it to the city, so they're on city land. If we built CTCA, if we built City Center, that we own that land, we could do GPLETs on that land because we own it, and then they could have excise tax and property tax advantages. But a lot of those things can only happen in a redevelopment area.
You know how many times the city's used that?
Once, for CTCA. Do you know of a second? Because none of us do.
APS inside City Hall.
Oh, thank you. Did you know that, Brian? You knew that, didn't you?
Yeah, a couple hundred square feet.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the one you're talking about is the big one.
The big one was CTC. Okay, how do we said that part of what we do for sales activities in the sales force, they go on trade shows and missions. So when the city cut out all travel, I'll show you later. This department cut out all travel too, but they found money a different way to travel. It's important for ECDEB because that's where they make their contacts. They'll go to bioscience shows, they'll go to avionics shows, solar conferences, and usually it's GPEC or APS that has a big booth. They pay for the booth. 6 or 7 cities will go. It's a disadvantage for us if we don't go and other cities do go. We went to 8 last year, and what you get is like about 25 to 30 pre-scheduled appointments with a company right there at the show, which is really good. We could come out with about 10 leads usually, and maybe 1 prospect who would come to town after that. At the cost of an average conference of $1,500, that's not too bad a cost to get a prospect who really does come to town. This year we're only doing 4 trade shows. A lot of people have cut down on the trade shows. We get about 500 broker-developer calls a week, conversations back and forth. The staff goes to about 35 networking luncheons where the developers and the brokers are there, and they have about 45 partnership meetings a year in those regional partnerships. Now, last year we developed 141 leads in total. Half of those came from GPEC. A third of them were direct, either called to us or we found them at a trade show. 11% came from brokers and 4% came from developers. So of those total leads at the end of the year, 122 were still leads. Nothing really had come of it. But 15 had become prospects, and we had 4 that turned into actual locates. Those created 762 jobs. There were Amazon.com, Enterprise Bank and Trust, then Amazon.com after 6 months expanded, and then Lord's Manufacturing. So they put in a total of $40 million investment in our city. And then we also had 16 locates for retail, which took up over 500,000 square feet of retail space. And about a year ago, about 9 months ago, we were asked the question, how are we doing on retail? And basically, we came out to the good of 122 openings versus the openings and the losses. We still came out 122 ahead. The Economic Development Department also is sort of an advocacy group for these outside clients, hold their hand through the city process. So they have to walk a thin line and make the client happy and work closely with the other city departments that are regulating our clients as they go through the city process. And the basic last activity they do is retention. We have what we call a B3 program, Building Bridges to Businesses, where we go out as teams and meet with the CEOs and the top management of current businesses that are here to try to find out what their needs are, what they're doing. In this case, we've found sometimes places that were expanding. We found a company that was ready to move because they needed to expand and didn't know of a building. Lord's Manufacturing, the city helped them and found the building and kept them. And then we find out about their business needs and refer them to SBA or other places that can help with their business needs. We also do redevelopment, which is facade improvement program. And, and the B3 visits, we did 22 last year. Okay. And the facade improvements is in the redevelopment area. Western Avenue is the biggest one we've done. We got a grant for $495,000 to do the streetscape in that one, and $25,000 for park benches from the Arts Commission. And 2 buildings are currently under construction, are currently getting facelifts on Western Avenue. And the West Valley Funeral Home also took advantage of this program. So overall, from 2009 to 10, the Economic Development Division cut just contractual funding by $75,000. That doesn't count the freezing of the business advocate position, which is worth about $78,000. They had an outside website. We brought them inside, so that was no longer a cost to the city. We looked at giving up the GPEC membership because we just didn't have the money when we were called to do huge budget cuts. Looked at cutting all the trade show and travel. So basically, but before that happened, Larry Lang, thank goodness, came to us and said, hey, we have an idea. There's the IDA, which is the Industrial Development Authority. Larry Price sits on that, if you have a question about what they do. But they are an authority that can issue tax-exempt bonds, like a conduit. And so companies can come to them, and if they qualify, and there's a lot of qualifications, in order to get this lower tax-exempt financing. And then they pay a fee over time for that financing. That goes into the IDA budget. The IDA had about, I think, $130,000, something like that. And so the idea was, okay, we have to make these huge cuts. Cut all your marketing budget, ECDEV, but we asked for $55,000 from IDA, one-time money this year. We've asked for it again next year, and they've basically said yes, so it's one-time money again next year. And hopefully in 2 years, maybe the economy will be better so that we can bring some of the marketing money back to make sure that they can still travel to those trade shows. Then at mid-year, we cut all the money left that was in the facade program because we've been carrying it for a long time on our budgets. Thought this is the time to just give it back. We don't see anybody taking advantage of it, and gave back all the advertising funds as well. So they cut basically $150,000. So between communications with $250,000 and ECDEV with $150,000, we cut $400,000, not counting the value of positions out of the budget. Questions?
Does your department have any program whereby if we find a company that we can receive some kind of an incentive, like a finder's fee?
Well, we don't at the moment, but if you think it...
Work it out.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Any other questions? How we do things? Thank you. Thank you.
Scott, Mike, I had a quick question. I just want a really quick question about this in focus again. It's $3.32 per household for times 24,000 or whatever. Is that just for the print and for the send out of in focus, not including what it takes to actually put that together?
Yeah, there's no cost putting it together because we do it all in-house.
Well, I know it's in-house, but how much time would you say is spent developing 6 in focuses?
I don't know. I used to write a 16-page in focus in 2 days with a lot of night work, so most of it done at night as opposed to during the day. So.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you. And one more. Now, this is the one that's coming back to you from 2 weeks ago with your inquiry about, can we get an update of the budget where it stands now? And Larry's going to give you that information for the current year.
That's right.
Thank you, Dick. And staff is passing around 3 schedules that I will go over. Recall a couple weeks ago we presented you with a revised Schedule 3 from the budget book, and that's the pages.
Thank you.
Get the right number here. 226 through that show the details of the schedules. And one of the concerns the committee had expressed previously was that those schedules included one-time cost, capital cost, and we showed how those got separated with the revised schedules. At that time, the committee requested that we provide additional data, actual data, for fiscal year 2008, 2009, and for the first 6 months of fiscal year 2009, 2010. The information that we just passed out provides that information. The top sheet, the one with the very fine print, I apologize for the size of it, but it's the best way we could get all that data on one piece of paper or in a reasonable size. Is the fiscal year 08-09 annual expenditures by month. I'm going to go through that very briefly, as we indicated, just to give you kind of the perception of what the issues are as you look at this so that you can follow through the data appropriately. One is that governmental accounting, at the end of the year, our books are kept on what is called a modified accrual basis. And what that means generally is that at the end of the year, we record liabilities as they are incurred. But during the year, we keep our books on a cash basis. As we pay a bill, it gets charged to that expenditure line item. Government also uses during the year a process called encumbrances, where we issue purchase orders for a full contract amount, and we track that against the budget, but not as an expenditure, simply as an encumbrance. I'll show you a couple of examples of how that comes into play with the data that we just submitted to you this evening. But it's important to understand that accounting as I go through these examples. On the 2008-2009 project schedule, first I want to review what the overall columns that we're giving you are. We start with the department and division, and that's exactly the same as in Schedule C, or Schedule 3, excuse me, and breaking out into the three ongoing cost categories, which are your personnel services, your contractual services, and your commodities, showing the actual expenditures for each month in there. You'll notice in September of 2008, Mayor and Council shows a negative $5,000 in the personnel category. That was an adjustment to correct some postings in previous months that should have been charged down, and you can find where those were charged in the Department Division 1320, just a little bit down that same page, that had $33,000. There was one adjustment that went back and forth in those departments. So it's not uncommon to have some credits in there. Generally, those credits are costs that are moved from one cost center to another cost center. By the way, I apologize. The last time I did this a couple weeks ago, we had our projector working, and I was able to point at these things, and unfortunately it isn't working tonight, and so I have to kind of refer to the charts that I've given to you. I apologize for that. It would clearly be easier if I could point those out to you. One thing I want to point out, because we're on the cash basis during the year, is you'll notice that the personnel costs can vary significantly. On the 2008-2009 schedule, I'll go through where those variances are a little bit. For the month of July, the July of 2008, we had two pay periods that month, but because June 30th is our year end, a big portion of the one pay period was actually shown in the previous fiscal year. So what July of 2008 consists of is one pay period plus 4 days of another pay period. August of 2008 consists of 3 pay periods. And so it is about 50% higher than the bulk of the rest of the months. That is also the case with December of 2008. That also had 3 pay periods in there. Finally, in June of 2009, on that schedule, that includes 2 payrolls plus an additional 7 days. And that gets all of these numbers on the accrual basis, but it does create confusion as you're looking at this data from period to period. There's a column on the right, you'll notice, that says, it is the third column from the end, that says year-end adjustments. Those are a couple of types of adjustments that do take place. Primarily, those are adjustments to record additional expenditures, but you'll notice there's a couple of large credits in there. One of those credits is in the finance department, and that was backing out some legal costs. That year, there were about $295,000 of legal costs relating to stadium negotiations, city center negotiations that were just funded in the ballpark. They were kind of one-time costs, but they're shown in each monthly category, and so they're subtracted out in that adjustments category to get down to an ongoing number that goes back to the other schedule that we gave you. The other major credit adjustment is in the fire department of about $500,000. And what that credit adjustment is that is us moving payroll costs. At that time, we were tracking the Sonoran Valley Fire Department costs separately, and so that was moving those costs out of the fire department over to the Sonoran Valley. We now currently include all Sonoran Valley costs as part of the general fund, and so 2009-10, we do not have that adjustment. Yes, sir.
Sorry. Howard Broadbeck. When you're still on this first thing. When you talked about that, did you say this was just operating expenses and you extracted any capital costs from this?
That is correct, other than I had to adjust the one item I mentioned of the legal fees to match that other cost.
Right.
The schedule that we presented 2 weeks ago, the revised Schedule 3, is prepared exactly on that basis also, to take all one-time and capital out.
And what do you think the total of that was taken out of here?
It varies by year because...
No, I'm sorry. I'm looking at this one that's got just the last 12 months. July
Oh, okay,
08.
just the schedule itself?
Yeah. Aren't you, and again, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but you're saying that you took actual expenditures from July 08 to June 09.
That's correct.
And you extracted any one-time capital expenditures?
One-time or capital.
Okay, one-time or capital. And so I'm asking, how many dollars was in the one-time or capital that came out of those 12 months? In other words, your total on this looks to be $52 million, right?
That's correct.
So how much one-time and capital was in addition to the 52?
I'd have to look that up back to the audit report to be able to answer that question. The way we did it, generally, as far as the one-time and capital, generally we were able to do it by a sort of account numbers. We were able to take a range of account numbers, and they don't include capital type expenditures. By the way, this also does not include any debt service expenditures, even though they're ongoing. It does not include those.
Okay, and that's about $12 million a year, right?
Amongst all funds, but not out of the general fund.
Not out of the general, okay.
This is just the general fund primarily that we're focusing on here.
Any other ongoing expenses that you'd say would not in
the big one that is not in this list, and it's the one I talked about earlier on your question, and that is the sales tax reimbursements. The reason it's not on this list is a consistency issue. For 2009, that was approximately $1.9 million. Those are the sales tax rebates that Paula was referring to earlier.
Oh, and that's a cost to us.
It is. We collect the sales tax, and a portion of it has to be paid out. So yes, it is a cost.
Okay. What do you know what the interest expense amount is that's not included in here? That's general fund.
General fund, excluding the stadium, the total debt service is about $900,000. When we add the ballpark in there, that's an additional, for annualized, it is $5.3 million. I think, if I remember right, in the current budget, it's only reflected at 4.6 due to some timing.
How about the transfers, Larry? Transfers reflected in this $53 million he's looking at?
No. These are simply the operating costs, and what we were trying to accomplish here was to give you information that we thought you asked for. If you want different, we'll get it for you, but it's to take the schedules that you were seeing and pull out those one-time so that you can see trends.
Right. This looks like your ongoing run rate.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
At the end of the schedule, you'll notice 3 lines at the very last page down at the bottom. We put those in to kind of help get an overall perspective of spending patterns. The first line with kind of the gray shadowing is the percent of the year expended. Obviously, we can only do that for fiscal year 2008-2009 as a completed year. We use the actual expenditures, so that is a percentage of actual expenditures by month. You'll notice July is very low and June is very high. The timing of that is because this is a cash basis schedule. The July payments generally do not reflect a lot of our vendor payments. June, we actually keep the books open into early August, and so that collects a lot of the payments at the end of the year that would normally be paid. As an example of that, easiest one that I saw to look at would be in the city attorney's office. And actually, I'm going to do that in the next schedule because that example, when I get to the 9-10 one, that shows much more clearly, but this does apply another cost. It just was a very obvious one there.
Mike, yeah, so looking at June, seeing a 13% rate, almost double what a typical month is because of the fact that you're going back for expenditures that occurred after the end of June and all collecting them into that month. Is that correct?
Paid after the not incurred. They have to be paid after June 30th. Well, they could be paid during June in that case. Most of them, though, are actually paid in July and August of those expenditures. Also,
but
keep
that's
in mind
why the percentage is high for that month.
And that percentage also does include payroll costs, which we do the full accrual up through, regardless of when the pay period ends. We include that. Okay.
And I'm sorry to keep asking this question. I'm just trying to understand what you have here before you go on. So
sure.
What you've got up here is you've got the 09-010 at $73 million. Did you put that up there, or that just happened to be there?
I have no idea. Yeah, that is citywide. That is not the general fund. So that number is a different number than what we're talking about. No, I didn't put that up there.
Okay, that says op.
That's okay. Leave it up. It's there. It's okay. It's okay.
And that says operating expenditures, but you're saying there's probably one-time expenses in that as well?
No. Included in the public works, for example, would be the utility enterprise funds. The general fund for this schedule is $50.3 million in fiscal year 9-10.
Okay.
Okay. Fair question. I didn't know what you were looking at, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well. Okay. I'm just trying to. Are you going to kind of go through a build-up from this to what you, based on this now, what your minimum expenditures could possibly be without one-times for 09-10?
I'm going to show you a history. What I'm really trying to do is give you pure data.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to give you a few of the qualifications to it.
Okay.
And so let me go through a couple of things, and then if there's more you would like us to present or get you, we'll be happy to, if I don't meet what you're looking for.
But does the $5.3 million interest expense for the stadium, does that get added then into general fund expenditures?
Yes, the general fund has to write that check and pay for it.
Yeah, and
but it is not allocated to a department.
All right. So it gets offset by any stadium revenues then, too?
No, that is a net number. That is net out of pocket to the general fund. And when we talk about the stadium a bit, I think we can ask Mike to, or else we'll show you how the accounting flows for those revenues,
right?
Those operating expenditures and so forth.
Okay. And is there? And again, sorry. You mentioned interest expense of $900,000. You mentioned $1.9 million of something else. What I didn't write down what that was.
That was the sales tax rebates, as Paula referred to.
And does that happen every year?
That does happen every year. That's
correct. About the same amount every year?
We look at it each year, but I would estimate it in that range, yes. We have a few drop out, others
and then there's
in.
the $5.3 million for the ballpark interest expense.
There also are some additional transfers. not reflected on these sheets, you have the, and these are transfers to other funds.
Yeah.
This is general fund only, operating by department. So, but there are some other transfers. There's $1.5 million per year to subsidize the operations of what's called the HERF fund, but that's really the streets department. There is a special dedicated revenue. By state law, we have to segregate that into its own fund. It's not adequate to fund the street operations,
Yeah.
so there's $1.5 million subsidy. Also, in addition, this year, I think it's approximately, in budgeted, I think originally was approximately $2.4 million and subsequently reduced, which is an operating subsidy in the ballpark, over and above the debt service.
Operating subsidy. So that
In
means,
other words, the expenses exceed the revenues for the ballpark, and so the general fund has to pay the difference.
okay. And last year, because there was only one team, you're saying that was $2.4 million.
No, the 9-10 budget, we projected originally 2.4. It's been reduced to about 2.1 through some cuts they've made, I believe. Last year, it was a lower number. I believe the original budget last year was 1.9 million because it was only one team.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. Thanks.
Next, what I'd like to do is to go to the second schedule that you have that shows fiscal year 9-10 actuals by month. This is set up the same way as the other one again. So your July of 2009 column, let me get my right notes page out here. July of 2009, I'm going to do subtraction here. It's 3 payrolls during the month of July, but it was 7 days that we subtracted from those 3 payrolls, and those 7 days were the ones I described back in June of 2009. So it's that one's higher, and then December of 2009 also is 3 pay periods.
And this is presented on pretty much the same basis as this.
That is correct.
Same one times taken out.
Yes.
And none of those other expenditures are included in here.
That is correct. We we also are showing in this column, or in this, a budget for the year. That is the annual budget. That is the adopted budget. That does not reflect any of the cost reductions that you have seen in these presentations that have totaled about $2 million. This is the adopted budget. And we're showing percentage of the budget expended. Now, the one difference on this, and it's simply because the year isn't over yet, at the end, with the percentages, and there were, I want to make sure there are percentages on the schedule we gave you. Yes, they're there. Those percentages are percentages of the adopted budget. We couldn't make them of actual because that's for the 12 months, but it's to give you some frame of reference. That's what we thought we would give you.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. One more question is, so if you go back to the 08 and it came through December 08, you were at 52% of cumulative total to year compared to 50% of the year, right? That's on this first thing.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the sheet first so I can find it.
Yeah. Is it reasonable to say that, is there anything in the 09 up through December 09 that would cause you to believe that those percentages would be any different for these numbers than they were for the previous year?
You know, I was thinking about that exact question today. In other words, I'm comparing budget on one and actual on the other.
$22 million in half the year. That's a pretty good number, right?
Yeah. And there have been some savings so far.
Yeah.
But at that, using that 52%, I think what that told me is that where we're trending in the first 6 months when I go the whole city,
right?
Because I can tell you a number of different expenditures that come one half of the year or the other. I was surprised at these numbers that the patterns came out as close as they did.
Yeah.
Probably because so much of our expenditures are payroll that is fairly steady as it goes.
Right.
So I interpreted this as I look at it, say, generically what we've spent the first 6 months looks to be pretty close to what we'll spend the next 6 months without any further adjustments.
That's only $44 million.
I understand.
And there's only let's see, There's only $12 million. Well, yeah, I'm not holding you to this, but you mentioned $12 million of other expenses that were not in here, right? As long as we keep away from all those nasty one-times and capital things for a while. I mean, you take that, that's 44 plus 12, right? That's only $56 million. And I don't know if this holds true, but the estimated total sources on the first night that were shown was going to be $60 million for that same period. So that would say you're $6 million ahead.
And
I'm not saying that's true, but I'm saying just based on that.
I think that that's a very fair analysis, that what we should be doing is we'll do some follow-up on those projections on that basis.
Yeah.
We added some of these percentages just today in there, and so a lot of this is, you're getting it very raw.
Yep.
But I think it's a very fair analysis to follow up with you on.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so Mike Kiak, let's say you're 50% right.
Yeah.
So what's...
That's right. You only have to be 50% right. It's time to go home, everybody. Let's go.
Right. Okay, let me ask the question. Okay, so let's assume we're 50% right, and the net at this point in time is $3 million. What happens to that money relative to next year's budget?
Well, we said we were $3 million short.
3 million short or 3 million?
No. In the first night, the presentation was $3 million short. Now you're saying if we were only 50% right here,
right,
you got $3 million.
Do I? I understand. So I'm conservative. I'm saying 50% right. Okay.
I think that that's very fair. What I'm going to say, as just from my position only, so I am not speaking for anyone else in this room, with full disclaimer. First, our structural deficit is larger than the $3 million. If you recall the presentation that John made very much up front, we talked about our ongoing expenditures exceeding our ongoing revenues by about $8 million. He was going to try, his goal was to try to save $3 million of that as expenditures in the first year. Okay. My position says we still could use some ideas beyond that. Okay? Yeah. And I'm taking the Fifth Amendment on the rest of the organization agreeing or disagreeing with me on that.
And this would be the other question is, are there committed one-time or capital expenditures in the balance of the year that are going to have to be spent, that you know that we couldn't just eliminate for the balance of the year?
Both, not only this year, but moving forward, we have certain commitments on the one-time and capital side that we just cannot get out of.
Can you defer them? Sorry, Mike, can you defer them?
We have been, as to the extent probably maybe even past the extent practical. We have contractual arrangements, and I'm happy to give you a breakdown of those. What they become is one-time savings, even if we could save them, but primarily they are contractual obligations and not really adding some new things, if you will. Yes, sir.
Larry, is this how we end up with getting an audit report in December that says you have $4.x million of unexpended funds from fiscal year 08, 09? Is that where this, that was a quote-unquote shock to everybody that, and it was reported as we found $4.5 million, that we perhaps didn't know that we had. We don't necessarily find out what that balance is until after the audit is complete, which is typically around December. Is that correct? Or February, rather?
Yeah. Our staff spends July, August, and September putting all the numbers together that build what that number is. And that number is a lot more complicated. I wouldn't label it a complete surprise, but the size of it. I will tell you from my own position that number is as low as I've seen it here and close to uncomfortably low. When you consider that when you go into a budget, you are making estimates as you're building that budget. And many of the estimates that we're making for next year's budget, we're making on data that we've just received. Some of which are sales tax data. We just got the sales tax data from Christmas this week. Okay? And that's what we're building all of this on, and you're going out 18 months at what you're estimating your future to be on. we have to have a level of conservatism, because the one thing we cannot do is go into a deficit on that budget at the end of the day.
Right.
In other words, that $4 million cannot be minus $4 million. There has to be a plus number. We want it, especially in these times, to be as reasonably low as we can make it, but still to the extent that if June sales tax comes in and we find out that we had zero construction sales tax and we expected 600,000, we can deal with that.
But I guess getting back to, Howard makes a very good, and it's very simple, and which is, I appreciate that if we appear to have $44 million in expenditures, but yet our budget shows 60 or 50 million, but we should theoretically be plus $6 million.
And that would
we really won't know that until after the audit is completed in February. I mean, really know it until after the audit is done in February of 2011. Is that
couple of things?
Very simplistic, but is that about it?
I'm going to say I hope we have a little better handle on that element of this than that. First, we've already said we expect this year, with the reductions we've made, to be $2 million under budget. What I have to look at is the math and the ratios that we've just seen say that $2 million should be $6 million. And if you look at that schedule, it's the $50 million budget versus 22 times 2. And maybe with rounding, that 6 becomes 5. Let's not get hung up there. But we're saying that would be 2. That's just on the expenditure side of the equation. We'll look a little bit and report back to you how that analysis looks. I don't think that is as much the area of there's some in there because no department can spend 100% of their budget or 100% plus a penny. Okay, you have to spend within your means. So there always is that bit of conservatism in there, but not at that extent.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well,
Yeah.
Larry, then say that your operating expenditures are, to me, these are not your operating expenditures, but say these expenditures are going to be $44 million. What are your operating revenues going to be? Are they going to be $33 million or $60 million? I mean, you can have an expenditure budget of $60 million, but that doesn't mean your revenues are going to be $60 million.
Let me use that as a transition to the third document that we gave you, which is a report that our budget office puts out. It's taken a little longer for us to get this out, mainly due to they're juggling quite a few balls in the air at once, getting information, as you can imagine. But in this report, we give you a summary of. We start with a summary of the. Does yours start with revenues?
Yeah.
Okay.
When is the end of the second quarter fiscal year 2010?
December is the end of it.
09. So that matches up with this other document.
Yes.
Okay.
And it takes a while. What happens with our department is the budget office takes the details that you've seen in those 6 months and reviews with each department. How are you coming on your budget? Where are you on this? This looks like a trouble area. This looks like maybe an area of potential gain or something like that. And that review is done every quarter. They've completed those reviews, and then with that, as well as analysis of the revenues, they put this out on a quarterly basis, and you are getting it. If it's warm to the touch, it is very hot off the press. I can assure you your copy was run today, and some of the text in it was done late this afternoon.
Howard Broadbeck, what was the first quarter actual revenue? Do you know?
I do not. I honestly don't. I don't have that report in front of me. But this is through the 2 quarters.
Oh, this is the cumulative.
This is cumulative for the 2 quarters. So that isn't that quarter by itself, or else our numbers really do look good.
Yeah, okay.
But that is cumulative through the quarters. Also keep in mind, this is pretty much on a cash basis. In other words, the sales tax revenues that were reflected at that point in time our sales tax cash that we're getting in December, which generally is October sales, and it isn't even all of that. So it's still very early data. We try to keep 6 months data in there to the extent that we can. We try in this report to give you a little better feel. Because we get more sales tax data, you see a little more analysis in this report than you will in the others. These numbers, for that reason, will not necessarily tie directly to the other report that you're given, because we try to give this a little more in depth. Some of the things that I look at in here is that the projections, for example, for the sales tax revenues, right now it's estimated that we're going to be down by about $55,000 for the year. Obviously, there's a lot of data left to come to get to that point in time.
I'm sorry, but did you say, is what you said was that the second quarter total, which is through December 09,
yes,
that only includes sales tax revenue perhaps through the end of October? Because it's delayed. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, so we haven't seen November and December. I mean, you haven't seen November and December sales tax revenue, which you would expect to be generally a higher point in the year than any time else.
Yeah, there is that. Let me ask back there, because now that I think about it, I think we do hold this report up to make sure we get the December information, which is November sales. I think I was incorrect to say it was December cash.
Okay,
was
so
I not?
November.
Terry, just yes or no? Thank you. Yes, I was incorrect on that. That does include, so it is quasi-accrual in that case. Okay?
And do you do any kind of similar analysis on the revenue side as you did on this one here? On the expense side that shows the
yeah.
Okay, I didn't get that far. All right.
And in fact, a few pages in,
okay,
you've got a document that looks like this that gives you that analysis that was done. My version was printed out at 2:30 this afternoon. I think the analysis, though, was done previously, but that analysis is that type of analysis, and that actually goes much more frequently than this quarterly report. Our sales tax, being our primary revenue source, is the one we watch the closest as that data comes in. But this is a schedule that shows various revenue sources, what the budget is, what we're collecting, shows some comparative data to 2009, and then off on the right it shows, again, the budget estimate and what our expected variance is going to be at the end of the year. A couple of pages later, you'll notice a schedule that shows expenditures by department, where they are by department, and what percentage they are of their budget. I do want to point out that this schedule is not on the same basis of the other schedules that we gave you. This schedule includes other costs that may be in there. One-time costs can be included in there and so forth. So it isn't going to be directly the same schedules that I gave you. That was given for the specific purpose of your request. And with that, take any others. I know we threw a lot of data at you.
Nice job. Yep.
My staff back there spent a lot of time putting this together for you.
And Mike, I recognize we made a very difficult request in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
But for me, as a committee member, it is definitely going to influence my decision making based on the quality of the data. I personally want to say thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Gary.
Gary Gelser, is this report presented to council in a work session, or will it be?
The intent of this report, you'll notice it's a quarterly report, and we've actually been doing them for about last year and a half. The intent has always been on that basis, present to senior management and to council, whether occasionally present it and so forth. But as you've noticed over the last year and a half, we've had a lot of financial reports to the city council, and they've been kind of at a whole different level than this. So the copies will be available, but the whole presentation style has been a whole lot different.
Yes, it has been at the sky level, not at the detail level.
But this information, it will be available to them, and as to presentations, definitely it is our long-term goal to do it. Part of it is we want to get a little more timely on it. Right now, these guys are very busy, as you can imagine, this time of year. We're building a budget. We're trying to get you some information, asking a lot of questions, not just you, I'm talking all over. And so they're very busy. This is a little bit slower than we'd like to turn it around, and we're working on that as best as we can with limited resources. Yes, sir.
Howard Broadbeck. I know accountants don't like to speculate, but would you call this relatively good news?
No.
No.
It is what it is. I don't, my experience in government is on the expenditure side, our departments are working very hard to manage their budgets.
Should I worry you have a $6 million problem at this point? Or should I worry you have a $3 million problem? Or should I worry we don't have a problem?
We have a problem. It's a structural deficit. I do not want to define it here for you other than to say that this won't solve it. And the reason I'm saying that is people often hang on to a number and so many variables are changing.
What variables?
What we have talked about for next year's budget, and very little has changed. My structural deficit, this is my definition of the structural deficit, is ongoing expenditures exceeding ongoing revenues. And the importance of that is that when you have a one-time revenue source such as construction sales tax that was $25 million just 3 short years ago, and this year is $6 million, and we don't know if we'll make it, and if you rely upon that to fund your police department, you've created a big problem. So that's my definition. It's not exactly what Larry's definition from his comments earlier. I'm a little more liberal in some of the revenues I'll include, including building permit data. But my definition there, what we've talked about all along, is that we have an $8 million structural deficit in next year's budget. City manager's proposal in that at that point in time was that we would try to bite off half of it this first year. But it still exists, in my view.
So in your view, is part of that based on the risk of the ability of the city to gain the revenue that they're achieving this year in the same sense next year?
Yes, very much so. Our sales tax, our non-construction sales tax has held pretty solid and has grown, obviously, with the sales tax increase that was adopted. Our construction sales tax, as I indicated, has dropped and will continue to drop. Our development-related revenues, and this is your building permits, I'm not talking impact fees, have dropped from $15 million to about $4 million. When I take out the $1.3 million that is coming from one time from Westcor. So, if you look holistically at it, that has been. As we move forward, government comes out of, we've all read a lot about how we're coming out of the recession at a national level. First of all, in Arizona, I personally think it's going to be a little slower out. Why? Because we've had a heavy dependence in the construction industry in the state. So I think that'll create a little slower out. Our assessed valuation is dropping, and it is going to drop worse for fiscal year 11-12 than it is for 10-11. We already have that data. For 12-13, because of the commercial impact, we're expecting it even worse.
From a financial perspective, you're more concerned about the city's ability to acquire revenue than you are at trying to minimize expense. Is that a fair statement?
I am concerned about minimizing expense to optimize the revenues and to get those in balance. Okay. I'm disclaiming all of that. I use the word I. Okay. And I won't look at the city manager as I walk by in case. Okay, thank you then.
Nice job. So a few things before we part. couple of points we're following up on. City manager is going to look into what he can share with you reasonably about where the staff is on their analysis of possibilities for cuts. Hasn't been shared with the council. Sensitive issue, and he'll look at what's possible there. You wanted some details on the sick leave accumulation, so we'll get some more information on that whole process. I think we put to rest the traffic signal question. Bulk pickup, savings options for different time frames for pickup. There may be a couple more, but that's what I have noted here. We also have, just as an aside, the West Valley is getting extraordinarily good coverage on baseball nationally. Extraordinarily good coverage about what that means to the solidification of the Cactus League. Yes.
Dick, my question was how many traffic lights do we own? Does the city have? If it takes 750 man-hours to man...
I'm sorry, you may have been out of the room when it's simply a mathematical error. What it is, it's actually 73. There's someone did the math and just left a decimal point out. So the data is faulty. If you go into your reference material, it's on another page. The presentation will show the number of total hours dedicated to the number of signals. Simply divide it, and it's 73. And it was 62 signals into 40-some hundred hours. So it was just a error. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Well, yes.
Dick, back when we generated ideas for revenue, I
Yes.
think I had asked at the time if the city owns any property adjacent to Interstate 10. We were talking about electronic billboards, and it was...
Yes.
So I don't know that answer yet.
Okay, we will get that. Thank you. Thank you. And please, if you would, get that information to me so that I can assemble it to get it back to you before next week's meeting, and then also to be able to put it up on the wall in some fashion that we can refer to and that the public can see. The question I have for you, how would you like to set up for next week? Because we're going to get into the discussion of your perspectives and start sharing different viewpoints with one another. Would you like to see this set up with, say, 4 tables and divide up into 4 tables and have that kind of conversation? Do you want to always be set up as a group of the whole and have your conversations that way? There's a lot to be said for either. My bias would be that you have small groups that allow you to have a little bit more detailed conversation than you can report out by table, and it creates a conversation. It's up to you, because there's a number of ways to skin this particular cat. Any thoughts on that?
If we went into small groups, I mean, would we be recording? I mean, how would that come across on the...
I think it's impossible for it to come across on the mics, but I would have to check, but I don't think that there's anything that precludes us from breaking into smaller groups to have conversation and come back to your mics.
I mean, it's not going to be... we're just going to find out if it's required then, right?
We're going to find out if it's required. But either way, it would still be a viable tool. It just wouldn't be much fun to watch.
And am I correct in assuming that next time as we are generating potential list items here according to our homework
Yes.
in each of those categories?
That's correct.
So it would strike me that in a group processing mode, we could actually do a very quick generation of ideas and record them all by category.
Certainly.
And then from there, decide how we want to talk about what's on there once we've all seen what's generated.
What I was hoping to be able to do was to avoid, because I think that would take quite a bit of time to go around the table and do that. What I was hoping to do was with what you would submit to me, that I could put those into categories and bring them back to you and send them back to you before the meeting next week.
Okay, so keep going. I like what you're saying there because it gives me a picture of what the meeting will look like. So if you have those generated ahead of time,
Yes.
Then what were you thinking would be the next step?
Then I think the next step would be that you would all have them. We would have something posted up here as a point of reference to show those. And then you would meet in groups to start to cull that down or to see where you might have some common interest or to try to get down to a point where what you send the council isn't this long, but it's those things which you collectively think are most valuable. And at the same time, what we would attach to whatever goes to the council is the entirety of the information from which you worked.
One of the things I wondered is there a way to use this device to help us consolidate those down so that we get more instant pictures of what the group is thinking?
That's a great idea. We'd have to, there probably is, and I'll give thought to that, but there probably is.
So if you can get some labels by category in there, and then start working this tool somehow, I think that we can probably, to get that down to the real essence of what we're trying to say quicker.
Very good. Excellent. Okay.
Mikey, I'd actually prefer we talk about all of the ideas as a group before we start breaking apart, because we have not had much group discussion. I mean, granted, there's been some disagreements at this table, and that's fine, but there's actually been a lot of agreement at this table. I just feel at least one pass through, or at least an initial discussion as a group.
I agree with you, and that's why I think this will come in handy, because it gives us time to talk, and yet you can get to an answer quickly when you finally pose it.
Okay. Yes.
Gary Gilzer. Dick, could you, what I would really like to see is, once you get all the ideas, have them inputted into the computer, flash them on the board, we can have a quick discussion about them, and people vote whether they think it's good or not. And then we call out the top 6 or whatever, and that's the way we present it. And I think it makes it a lot simpler than going into groups and having discussions, because I think you're going to get the feedback that a lot of the committee want. And that way, and you can take, you're going to get duplication of ideas. So what we're going to ask you to do is when you get duplication, let's list it one time and it was presented by 5 people or something like that, so we know how many people thought of this or wanted to talk about it.
Yes, sir.
Dick, this is Bill Stipp. I want to make sure that, or I don't want to make sure, I would like to see us, if we're going to vote or do something along that line, that we kind of identify maybe ahead of time some dates so that, I'd hate to see us do it all next week and everybody get the information for the first time next week and then it's all gut reaction instead of thoughtful process, number one. Number two is if we pre-identify some dates, that way if folks aren't going to be here, we can figure out how to make that work instead of, tonight we just decided, and then half a dozen people are excluded from that process. So I'm kind of like to throw that out to the group about maybe pre-identifying some things that we're not really going to take voting until 2 weeks down the road or X number of days or whatever.
So the way you'd see it, next week would be a sharing and a discussion, and then another week after thoughtful consideration, you would then do the voting?
That would be my suggestion. That way no one's doing it off a knee-jerk reaction or their gut instinct, and they get some time to think about the various feedback and whatnot that's been presented. Kind of the old sleep on it theory.
Okay. That sounds...
For a couple weeks?
Because it would be 2 weeks. You'll be missing the week in between. That would make that next meeting really, really important, because it's going to be hard to catch up with people that aren't here. I mean, it's doable, but it's going to be awful hard to catch up and have the same
And everybody
dynamic.
knows that on March 24th, so the folks that aren't here and the folks that are having trouble, if you've got input and you've been listening all the way, the 24th or whatever that date is, we decide, you really need to be here if you really are going to, if you're passionate about getting your...
I understand. Yes.
Dick, when you did your polling this last week of the people that have not been attending, have there been people quit? Have there been people that are just not interested in coming back? Or what did you find out?
It's not, the data is not fully in, but we've got one person who's been ill. And you may recall at the beginning, there's no attendance requirement per se.
Right, absolutely.
So my question to them is, do you want to continue, and how can I help you get up to date so when it comes time to make observations? I have not got everybody's position back. We may have one who actually wants to withdraw for personal reasons. Are we okay then for next week we'll focus on that? And we'll have a conversation of the whole, so we won't break it.